there's two sides to every coin. Then there's a conversation you can join. But I'm an old dog and there's new tricks. And some of my opinions you just can't fix. 'Cause I'm an old man yelling at the sky. I'ma shake my fists at the clouds and cry. Get off my lawn, you snowflake, before I have a meltdown, breakdown, shakedown. 'Cause this is my hometown, so back down, sports clown. It's all just a game, and it's the last down, let down, cowtown. I said it's all just a game. I give the touchdown, the rundown, the lowdown. 'Cause it's over the game, gonna crack down and shut down, the sundown. I said it's all just a game.
Say hey, kids. How the hell are you? Welcome to a Friday edition of this very show. I am me. You are you. I'm glad you could be with us. We are broadcasting live from Treaty 7 territory. Everyone is welcome. This is an all-inclusive and safe podcast. Well, I mean, safe in the sense that nobody will get hurt. Your mind might bend a bit. Oh, I just had a little conversation with Jack and Gavin about what I would do if I was Chicago. Neither one of them bought in. We will be talking quite a bit of the draft today. Actually, Stephen Ellis from Daily Faceoff, the prospect analyst and assistant editor over there, is going to join us. And thanks to Gav for setting that up, because we all know who's going first, but who's going second and who's going beyond that. The World Hockey Championships are underway. Canada's comfortably in front, but this is a podcast. So when you listen to this, most people listen to this, that game will have been long gone. So I'm not even going to update you on it. You'll know what's going on. If you need to know, you'll know. Do want to recognize a couple of things. If I seem just a little slower today, it's possible, completely possible. I made my long rumored return to the 7HL this morning, Calgary's #1 men's rec hockey program that's talked about on the media. Nobody mentions any other league more than the 7HL gets media mention, because there's a handful of media guys who play in it. Anyway, I only play in the summertime, usually because my winters are full, but that may change. Not bad. I got to tell you, not bad. Every winter, I worry about when I get back on the ice. I made that long trek from goaltender to defenseman to forward in the last decade and a bit. Came back today, had a real strong, I won't lie. I'm kind of beaming today. I'm kind of a little cocky. I'm a little proud. Goal and an assist in my first 2 shifts. 4-point game. One big, actually. Wasn't expecting that. Quite honestly, every year I expect to go back and die just right there. Don't expect to finish the game. Somehow I managed to do that, but I was also offensively productive. And anybody who plays in the 7HL, and there's a handful of people who do, will tell you that's shocking. Really shocking. Live today in the local loved, delicious Oodle Noodle studio. Since opening their first store back in 2005, Oodle Noodle has been all flavor and just the right amount of weird. 2 locations, 1244 17th Avenue Southwest, 105 Main Street North in Airdrie. Pickup and delivery. Danny Austin is going to join us in studio. The Danny Austin, not a Danny Austin, but the Danny Austin will join us. Stampeders training camp is underway. It's weird, isn't it? I'm looking at the jersey. Well, can't really spin the camera, but Bo Levi's not there. When's the last time 19 wasn't, it's 10 plus years that he wasn't part of a training camp. But hey, on and on and on. History's got a funny way of doing that, right? Danny's also been covering the Flames off season, so lots to talk about with him. As I mentioned, Stephen Ellis from Daily Faceoff will join us. We'll talk some prospects, world championships, and a little hockey with him. Let's talk a little bit. So let's start with the local hockey heroes. There's the good and what? Let's start with the good. Candace Gowdy and National Hockey League, Major League Sports, number one foundation, $400,000 back in the community yesterday in pump tracks. Continue to build those recreation spots, those outdoor spots where all Calgarians can go. I was not familiar with the pump track until a couple of seasons ago. And then I went and watched it, and not so much as a participant, but just as an observer. And I know there's a handful of you guys right now that are probably watching this show going, yeah, we know what a pump track is. And if you don't know what a pump track is, go and watch it because it's a communal center. It is a place that kids and adults alike, families go there to be part of the pump track. Phenomenal. So again, the Flames Foundation continues to do incredible work in our community. And I often wonder, if the team were to leave, who would do that work? Who would pump millions and millions of dollars back into? See, this is the thing, right? Because there's supposed to be this new building coming, this agreement. And it was kind of announced with a lot of fanfare. And then what? And then who? It seemingly has, like, it's become an election issue for some, but there doesn't seem to be anybody championing it. There doesn't seem to be anybody out there saying, hey, this is important and here's why. Now, maybe just not in my world, but it doesn't seem like that. Yet, here is the Calgary Flames organization through the foundation going out and putting money into our community that would come from where if they weren't here? Who is going to do that? The city? No, they've got a budget. I don't know who's going to do that. Not that they're going anywhere, but anyway, this brings me back to this. Why aren't you, why isn't somebody selling this building to us? Please. And that's a weird thing to say. Where are the salesmen? Come on, sell me this building. All right. This was weird. I don't know if you guys saw this, courtesy of Frank Seravalli from Daily Faceoff yesterday, involving the local hockey heroes. Apparently, there are teams interested in the services of former general manager Brad Treliving, but the Flames are not reportedly. I haven't confirmed this, but reportedly, and his contract will end on June 30th. He, of course, left the Flames, not the other way around. And this is completely within their rights. It's contract. It's it's the law, really. It's the law, everybody. But it strikes me as weird. Like weird. Why? You offered him a contract. You wanted him to stay. He chose not to go. Why be like that? There are times where that organization does make one scratch their head. Now, there may be plenty of you out there right now that are watching and going, well, that's the way it is. You sign a contract. Perfect. No problem. But sometimes I would think you would want to be perceived as being above kind of things like that. Not allowing visiting teams onto the ice until the exact moment, not turning on lights and all that BS that you hear about in the playoffs and crap in other places. Anyway, I saw that yesterday. I just wanted to bring it up, make mention of it. If true, it's disappointing, but I'm biased because I like Brad and I'd like to see him get another job. Quickly, before we get to the first guest of the show, a quick update on the National Hockey League playoff system known as the Stanley Cup playoffs. Carolina, first team to move to a conference semifinal. They beat New Jersey in OT last night by a 3-2 score. Jersey, a couple times in this game, were ahead, but Carolina wins the series 4-1. They're killers. They are killers. I don't think they're the best team left. I don't even necessarily think they're going to win the Stanley Cup, but they're killers. Carolina, with the injuries that they've had and they've suffered, and the fact that they're really not riding a bona fide number one, just might have the best blue line that anybody's had in a long time, with a bunch of guys that should be bigger stories than they are. They are by the people who know them, but they're killers. And Dallas winning at home last night, 5-2 over Seattle. The Stars now leading this series 3-2. Going back to Seattle, this kind of has that feel of 7 games. It kind of has that feel. I don't think it's bona fide, absolute, but kind of feels like in the second round we might see 7 games. 2 games on tap tonight. Florida in Toronto. The Maple Leafs staving off elimination once. Can they do it twice? And then Edmonton in Vegas. This series tied at 2 games apiece. They may need 9 to 15 games to actually figure out the winner in that one. Having said that, they only get 7. So the first 1 to 4 is going to win. Still like Edmonton against the field right now. Not as a personal choice, not as a fan. Just that we live in this gambling-centric world, fantasy world, if you will. And if I was to put shekels down on anything, that's where I would put my shekels. I would hold my nose doing it, but that's where I would put my shekels. We shall get to our first guest, shall we? Brought to you by Ski Cellar Snowboard, skicellarsnowboard.com. 76 years. You go all the way back to 1946. They opened their doors in Calgary. 76 years. Now, of course, they didn't have the internet back then, so there was no skicellarsnowboard.com. But 76 years, 3 locations, McLeod Trail by Chinook Center, 17th Avenue Southwest, just off of 14th Street, and Bow Ridge Road Northwest by McDonald's, just down from Windsport. An honor, a pleasure for us. First time to do this. A fan of his writing over at Daily Faceoff. He is also the associate editor and prospect analyst. So who better to have on in the week in which we celebrated Connor Bedard Day on Monday? This has got to be, for someone like him, American Thanksgiving, right? And then the draft is Christmas. We welcome in Stephen Ellis, kind enough to join us today. Mr. Ellis, how do we find you?
On Twitter, Ellis Hockey. Right now it's a lot of World Hockey Championship tweets, but I'll also be at the Leafs game tonight, so I'll be tweeting about that.
Okay. How do we find you physically right now? Are you good? That's what I meant. Are you okay? Are we getting you in a good spot?
You know what? I've been coming off of a cold. I'm doing okay, I'd say.
Everybody around here is sick. Even you're sick. You're part of the Nation Network. You're not even in Calgary and you're sick. I don't know what the hell's going on. Connor Bedard Day was Monday. Thank God for tanking. Chicago finds the next great one. Just some thoughts now with 5 days separation on how that all shook down and maybe even more importantly, where some of the other bingo balls fell for teams.
Well, it's kind of nice to finally move on from the draft lottery. It's like the first time we really heard about Bedard, I think he was like 12 or 13. And, that was quite a long time ago. So now we kind of can look at towards where he's going to go. And in this case, it'll be Chicago. And, you lose the 2 franchise stars you had before in Patrick Kane and Jonathan Toews. And now you get this new one who's going to be, franchise changing for sure.
Yeah.
But then you look at it, and to me, it's more interesting to kind of see the other teams. I feel bad for Anaheim, twice losing that opportunity to get that first pick, first with Crosby, but then now with Bedard. But, you're still going to get a guy who's going to be a superstar in the NHL. So, there's still that silver lining, I guess.
Superstar or really good player?
I'm fully on the Adam Fantilli's a superstar prospect.
Okay.
He's like, I've watched him probably more than I've watched Bedard, and I feel like he's a first overall pick in most years.
Oh, he's that? Okay. So I go back to a couple of drafts ago where, Philly and New Jersey picked at the top. Kid out of Brandon. I'm blanking now. But anyway, why did I do this? But anyway, last year, next year, Fantilli could have gone first overall.
No question. Not a question.
Okay. So what's the rest of that first round like? Is that another plateau? I mean, is it first, is it second, and then another plateau?
It's, it's kind of weird. It's like this year's draft. It's, I hesitate to use the word elite because there are a lot of flaws in the draft. There's no real good number one goalie. There might not even be a defenseman in the top 10. But in terms of the high end offensive talent, you're still going to be getting guys who are going to be huge players. There's an argument to be made that Leo Carlson most of the years would be probably number 2.
Mhm.
Will Smith was an unbelievable prospect with the U.S. national development team. He came number 2 in the rankings for the U.S. national development team in a single season. Gabe Perreault, number 1, but like they had to go out there and beat guys like Jack Hughes, Jack Eichel, Austin Matthews. Like that's some quality talent there that to beat. The big wild card there being Matvei Michkov. Depending on scouts, some say he's the second best prospect in the draft. The guy that was the closest to Bedard kind of heading into this year, but just there's a lot of circumstances there that make him fall down a little bit. But I'd say top 5 is all elite talent here.
But thanks to Gavin, Nolan Patrick, and Nico Hischier. That's what I was trying to think of that draft, where you have that interchangeable 1-2, right? And clearly this isn't that, and number 2 isn't interchangeable either. Let's talk about the middle of the draft, because here in Calgary, that's where people will probably have their eyes, around 16. You've done a mock already, but what type of player do you think could fall to the Calgary Flames in that middle pack?
This is one where you're going to get a guy who's a top, if you're going forward route, you're going to get a top 6 forward for sure. The guys I would look at are Edward Shala, Riley Heidt, and Andrew Cristall. Cristall was the one that I did pick going to Calgary. This is a guy that from a skill perspective is one of the most talented players in this year's draft. Consistency could be an issue, and he's not great defensively, and that's the issue. But if you give him a reliable number 1 center, I think he can cause havoc. And so that's one I'm looking at. Riley Height's another one where a lot of people probably thought he could have been a top 10 prospect at the beginning of the year, kind of fell off a little bit, but he was still one of the biggest reasons why Prince George was a relevant team in the WHL this year after years of missing the playoffs or just getting out in the first round. And then I also do like Edward Shala. I think a guy that I might have higher than a lot of people. At number 14, just inconsistency plagued him this year. But you could see those glimmers of games where he could just absolutely take over. And I think that's a good sign, because when he's playing against men at 18 years old, that's already tough alone, and he had to do that the whole season. But against his own age group, very few players could compete with him. So those are the 3 guys I think I'd be aiming for right now.
If the Flames were to go positionally and try to grab a defenseman, now that may involve them moving back or moving them up, but who might be in that area if they were looking at the blue line?
See, that's the issue with this year's draft. It's like, if you really need a defenseman, you go like I don't know if there's a guy that really will make you too excited, but the one that I would say maybe to keep an eye on there would be Dmitry Simashev. Played in the KHL this year. Didn't love him in the first half of the season, but his late season play really grew on me. Played really well in the MHL playoffs. So he'd be kind of the one I look for. But, this feels like kind of a reach to be getting a defenseman in that pick, just because there's no one that I think could really be a huge game changer there.
Okay, and the requisite, if you're going down the road, do we see a goalie sneak into this first round?
When I asked scouts about that at the NHL or the under 18s last month, most of them said no. And when I asked who the top goalie would be, I got like 5 different answers. So no, I don't expect it. I think we could see 2 to 3 in the first or in the second round, like Trey Augustine out of the States, Carson Bjarnason, a Canadian, and chance that, well, I should say Michael Rabbi will be probably the first goalie taken, but there's a chance that Slovak goalie Adam Gayon from the World Juniors could be drafted up high. Those are the guys I'd be looking for, but realistically, I don't think we'll see a goalie go in the first round.
So how far down into this draft is the depth? I mean, is the second round strong? Will this creep into the third round? I mean, those are all kind of sliding scale questions, because now with 32 teams, right, they prolong these rounds a little bit. But how deep is this draft in terms of the talent?
I'd say, it probably the second round, you're still getting a guy who could be a really quality player. Like one name to keep an eye on there would be Kasper Halttunen out of Finland, where, some scouts would tell you he's got top 10 potential. Others will say, might not even be a second round prospect. It's just a wide range on there. And there's a lot of guys like that. There's so many wild cards. The thing to keep in mind is when you're drafting a lot of it, you're just projecting what the long term is and not what the player is right at this exact moment. But that's all you can really go off of at this point. I think, you're probably got a good maybe 65, like the top 65, top 70 are all pretty good guys that I think have a good shot at making the NHL. But this year, I don't think we're going to see a ton of like 6th and 7th round steals.
Gotcha. Gotcha. Let's go back up to Fantilli, because you've written about him. You have an article on him right now. He's over at the World Hockey Championships. Tell us a little bit, because again, living in the shadow of Connor Bedard, it's about now that we start to learn about these other players. So tell us what we need to know about him.
Well, right now he's on the second line with Canada at the World Championship, and as you were introducing him, he just missed a really good scoring chance. He's been playing really good though for given the situation there. But this is a guy that I've been able to watch in his minor hockey days, growing up in the Toronto area, and talking about being in the shadows of Bedard. In the year, like, there was a potential that he could have gone exceptional status to the OHL the same time as Shane Wright, and they played against each other, and it was all Shane Wright all the time. But you look at Fantilli and just what he was able to do, and he was physically dominant against guys that were almost 2 full years older than him. Right. And he isn't this massive player right now physically, but he's still got the strength, he's got the skill. You look at him in the NCAA this year, and we've seen very few freshmen play as well as him. The only other freshmen to win the Hobey Baker are Paul Correa and Jack Eichel. And I'd say those 2 players turned out to be pretty good players. So kind of just what we've seen from him, it's just, it's close to the complete package. And, the brains are there, the skills there. He got into a fight in the NCAA. You never see that happening. So he's just kind of like, he's the guy that you will build a team around, kind of like Connor Bedard.
Has he made a determination if he's going back, or is he waiting to see what happens at the draft?
He told me that he will be planning. He hasn't made the decision yet, but if I had to guess, he will be in the NHL next year. I don't know if he's got anything to gain in the NCAA next year. Right. Like maybe go out and get 80-something points, but just the way he's playing, like I don't see it.
Anybody left at the University of Michigan? Like it's been a good couple of years for them in terms of drafting.
Well, the Blackhawks are going to like Frankie Nazar as soon as he kind of gets back to full health. Guy that should have done great things this year, but missed almost the entire year.
We'll move on beyond the draft here in a second, but just a couple other things. And part of it is because I did see you talk about this, and I think it was on your social. I'm always fascinated by guys that were skipped over or guys that are re-entering. How much, or do we know yet how many of those types of players will re-enter, be part of this draft this year, and what role will they play?
I think the only guy that we know that will be going, that has been drafted, that will go back in, is Benjamin Gaudreau. And he was a guy that, when he came onto the OHL scene, it looked like he was probably an NHL starter, like guaranteed, and things did not really work out for him in Sarnia. Like he had some good runs, but not enough to go out there and be the guy everyone kind of wanted him to be. And it wasn't the starting goal at the World Juniors, for example. But I think, he could still be someone that'll get picked and will be something of value. But in terms of that, I think it's still too early to kind of find out what that is. The one guy, there's some guys in the OHL, who would be a really good player that's going in for a second time. But it's still kind of up in the air to see how teams are looking at it. The thing to keep in mind is these players were still part of the group that were really affected by the COVID shutdown, especially the OHL players who lost the entire year. And some of those guys are ones that are going to come out and come shining.
Back to, you were talking a little bit about Shane Wright and exceptional status. Bedard is the first Western League player with that. Is it easier now? Because exceptional status seemed to be, for the longest time, a rarity, once every 5 or 6 years. It just seems we have that conversation a lot more. Has that process, or that trigger, whatever we want to call it, is that become a little bit watered down? No disrespect to Shane Wright, but he's not Connor Bedard or Connor McDavid or anything of that caliber, right?
The one thing I'll say about Shane Wright, having watched about 50 of those games that he played in his OHL draft year, was no question he deserved it. He had like 150 something points, one of the best seasons. He truly was affected by that last COVID year. In terms of exceptional status, we start to hear kind of about it every couple of years now. The one that we would likely see another one coming into the WHL in the next couple of years, and that's Mickey Dupont's son. Mickey Dupont, former NHLer, Spengler
former
Cup
Flame,
superstar.
Yeah.
And his son's looking like the real deal out there in the West. So, it's still really hard to get. A guy like Jack Hughes and Adam Fantilli weren't qualified for that. And you look at those quality players. So it's still still a high bar you got to raise, but I think we hear more players that are in the discussion on an annual basis because of just the talent we keep seeing.
So last one, and we'll move on to the World Championships. And you'll get, as you get to know me, I'm going to ask you really weird stuff. But I waited this time. I didn't ask it off the top. Because it was a tanking year, if we can call it that, you have some teams with a whole bunch of picks and some teams with a whole bunch of high picks. Is there any scenario in which you could throw a boatload of picks at Chicago and load them? Because they've got a whole bunch of picks beyond that number one pick. Like, that's a lot of picking they're going to do this year. I mean, take Arizona, for instance. If you threw everything Arizona has, 13 picks at Chicago, I believe that would give them 23 picks in the draft. Anybody doing anything like that? Is there any way at all of wresting that player away from Chicago?
That'd be fun, wouldn't it? But no,
it would be.
I don't see how it would benefit the Blackhawks. They've got 6 picks in the first 2 rounds this year. If anything, they're going to be selling off the picks, not
right.
Exactly. Honestly, I don't see it happening. I think they're gonna keep it Dard. I don't know, unless the Oilers are saying we'll give you McDavid. Otherwise, I don't see it happening.
Yeah, no, me neither. But we do have a couple of teams with just a whole mitt full of picks, right? They were in it just like Chicago was. There's some interesting, Arizona, Chicago. It will be beyond just their overall first pick. They should be able to come away with 2 or 3 or 4 players that should be playing for them in 2 or 3 years.
Yeah, the Blackhawks have one of the best young prospect cores, and give credit to Columbus and Anaheim too. Both of them, I'd say, maybe the 3 of them have top 5, top 10 prospect pools. So, the Blackhawks, they sold off knowing that this was definitely going to be a big possibility, and if they didn't get him, they were still going to likely get a guy that could play next year, like Carlson, like Fantilli. So
yeah,
it was going to work out no matter what. But when you got 2 first-round picks and 4 second-rounders plus a ton of picks in the last couple of years, you're going to have a team that should be pretty competitive pretty soon.
And actually, credit to our producer Gavin, he brings this up, and I should have asked this before. Are we worried about what's the temperature in terms of drafting Russians right now? All things considered, HF, situation and the war in the Ukraine.
Last year wasn't really a big issue like a lot thought. This year, the added issue of Michkov's contract being long term in the KHL is definitely a big concern there. So it's depending on who I've talked to. Some say he'll still go top 3. Some say they'd be shocked if he's in the top 10. And
really,
a lot of teams are. It's kind of the thing I'm getting here is that teams are trying to psych each other out.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
And there's some smoke, there's some fire, but a lot of the time it's just I think teams are just kind of just trying to get into everyone's heads here. But the team, let's say Michkov goes 6, 4 of those teams are going to be looking back and saying, "Uh-oh, we made a mistake." He's that talented of a player.
Let's turn our attention to the World Hockey Championships, or as some would call it, the NIT of the Stanley Cup playoffs. What do we got in terms of prospects playing over there this year that we should pay attention to?
Not a lot, but the ones we got are really good. You got Adam Fantilli, Leo Carson. So those 2 potential top 3 picks. And then David Reinbacher for Austria. I expect him to be a top pairing defenseman on that team. And so he'll be playing a lot of minutes. Those are the 3 in terms of, the NHL prospects. You look at Matt Coronado. I know Flames fans will be happy to hear that he was probably the United States' best player. And he got robbed of a goal that should have counted. I don't know how they didn't. But yeah, he scored and they called it a goalie interference. It's like, nope, that was not goalie interference. Lane Hudson, already seeing him making some good moves there with Coronado to make things work. But also it's been weird kind of seeing Milan Lucic on the top line for Canada. He clearly isn't kind of keeping up the pace, but Mackenzie Weegar is a big reason why Canada's winning 6-0 right now, and this is his first men's world championship game. So I will say this, Calgary, I know you guys would rather be in the playoffs, but there's a lot of good players playing in this tournament.
Yeah, and that's always been kind of the the booby prize, if you will. You get a chance to see these guys and where they fit and everything. And I mean, I go way back on this, but there's some players that have gone to that tournament that have come back as better players. Doesn't always happen that way, but they get that opportunity to play with better players or different roles and things like that. Are there many potential free agents in this tournament? I mean, we talked about the draft eligible kids, but is there a lot for scouts to watch this year?
I asked somebody who was over there. I'm like, who should we really be keeping an eye on? And they are like, nobody. Nobody that has kind of been like really kind of seen as someone heading into this tournament. Matthias Niederberger, though, the German goalie, has been playing really good against Sweden, and he's really been good against NHL quality talent in this tournament year after year. I'm surprised he hasn't come over at this point, but this year it's kind of like it's weird because this year really matters in terms of the Olympic seeding. But in terms of the actual NHL quality players and the guys you really need to watch, it's kind of not there this year.
Just, I mean, arguably maybe the best player in the playoffs right now is Draisaitl. What are we seeing from that country? Are we going to see more picks coming in the next couple of years, high draft picks from them, or have they kind of depleted that high end talent for the short term?
I think they've kind of hit that peak already. When they had with the Cider, they had Peterka, they had all those guys, Stützle. It's like some great quality players, but Germany just got relegated at the U18s, which was not a good sign. That team just could not score, and their World Junior team's not at the same level anymore. So it's gonna be a few tough years, I think, for the Germans, but they, it'd be interesting to see if they can get those guys to keep coming back for these international events, because they've got the skill and they got the hardworking depth and some good goaltending at this tournament every year, but they just, need their stars to show up.
Well, you wonder, I mean, if we got back to best on best at the Olympics, you wonder how much Germany kind of jumps up in that conversation. Do they pass Switzerland?
No, I don't know. Actually, that's a tough one. Switzerland, it's just when they don't need star power to be good. They're kind of like the Finns, which are like when Finland won the World Championship in 2019, they did it with no NHL players. When Canada had a full NHL team out there. Switzerland's kind of just this hardworking group, but they haven't had anyone outside of, Nico Hischier kind of come in and be a huge difference maker. While Germany's had a couple in a short span that are definitely spread out around the lineup. So I'd say, they probably could beat the Swiss. I'd say they're kind of like if Canada, Finland, Sweden, USA, Czechia are all there, Germany and Slovakia are pretty close at this point.
And just a thought, and rightfully so, they're not there, but neither Russia or Belarus in the tournament and won't be for a while. How has that impacted the games? I mean, we've gone through a World Juniors now without them. What has it done to international competition by removing those two teams?
Oh, I think, across the board, and don't take this as me saying I want them back, but
no.
Yeah.
No.
But across the board, it's definitely hurt the quality of hockey. The Women's World Hockey Championship, I was at that tournament. They would have probably been better than France or Hungary. And then, you look at the men's tournament where Canada doesn't have a lot of tough games. Like their toughest opponent might be Czechia in the very final game. So Russia there would have made things a bit more interesting. The World Juniors, that's definitely been a downgrade without them, but it just is what it is. But it feels like we're being robbed of Michkov's like golden international hockey years, and that sucks.
Yeah. You mentioned the World Women's. I'd love to take the opportunity to pick your brain on one of my favorite topics, because she's a friend of mine, but she also coaches here. I think the world of Carla McLeod as a hockey coach, not as a women's hockey coach, as a hockey coach. You had a chance to watch her. Any thoughts on what she's been able to do with Team Czechia the last 2 years?
I did not expect the Czechs to go out there and win bronze. But she just that team just played such a North American style of hockey. Will grind you down. There's got the speed. They were, as physical as you can get. And, talking to more of the experts there that follow women's hockey more. And they're all just like, she's the future of the game. She's like one of the best coaches out there. And a lot of people are saying like she should be doing national teams at the men's level. So be interested to see what she could do there. But the Czech team just continues to amaze me in some of these tournaments where, they don't have a ton of star talent, but they'll just go out there and make you work for it. And we saw that at this year.
One of the things she's done is allowed the world to watch her work. I mean, we've been inside the dressing room. She has no problems coming to a coaching clinic and talking exactly what they've done. I find it refreshing, quite honestly. I find it somewhat refreshing that it's a player-focused, kind of an empowering coaching style rather than what we're used to, especially from men's hockey.
Yeah, and she was very insightful with all the conversations I had with her at the tournament. It's just like, you'll get a lot of coaches that don't want to tell you a lot or keep it very simple, but she's telling you her thought process. She's giving you all the why she decided to go with certain lineup moves and things like that. And then you saw the videos that WHF did where you could she was mic'd up and you got to hear what she had to say. So it's just like a real new school coach that with new world thinking, and you see again the success the Czechs have had already with her.
It's a new world, but listen, I did an event with her, and she was asked a question if she had any interest in coaching in the NHL, and she said no, she just wants to coach the highest level of women's hockey. Having said that, I have said on this program that if I'm the new general manager of the Calgary Flames, I'm talking to her. Mm-hmm. I think she should be interviewed by NHL teams or American Hockey League teams or whatever. Do you agree with that approach?
Absolutely. A good coach could coach anything. Yeah. And, that's the thing. It's like you'll when you see like a coach that will go to the AHL or junior hockey and they'll have come from like a junior A level or something like that, you're still, the game doesn't necessarily change. And if you know how to coach at one level, you should be able to coach on many other levels. And I think with her, just the Czechs are not a super powerful women's hockey nation on pure talent alone. And a lot of the times they're having to rely a lot on their goalies, but their job is to make everyone's lives miserable. And that's something that she's able to do. So she gets a lot out of a team that might not necessarily be the third best team every single year. So I 100% think that she should be looked at for some NHL gigs. And, I get maybe not want to go to like the AHL or something like that, but I think that she's got a good future, or at the very least, have her more involved on the men's national team side.
Yeah, it's I'm not 100. I'm sure there's a story there, but how do you win 2 medals with this country and not find your way coaching this country? But they've got their own problems.
Yeah, no, I'm impressed. She's a great coach, and a lot of the biggest hockey minds seem to really trust her.
You are in the center of what I'm assuming is a tension convention. Care to tell us a little bit of what, where you are in Toronto, what it's like heading into this game against the Panthers tonight?
Like I'm literally in the center of the storm because I'm a 2-minute walk away from the arena. So I will be there tonight for the game for Daily Faceoff, and I'm looking forward to it. But it's something where everyone's nervous, and I think a lot less nervous than going to Game 4, where it just seemed like anyone talking about it, or the mood in the media, the mood on the radio, whatever. It just no one had any faith in this group. Right now, I think it's a different story, but still cautiously optimistic here. You're still going with essentially what is your third goalie. Matthew Knies was a very positive force for that team that's not in the lineup due to injury, so you're not at full strength here. But Austin Matthews, I feel like he's got to be playing injured at this point. He's not been the same, and the players are still quick to say like he's had these impacts in these other ways, but obviously not putting the pucks in. So it's not a Toronto group that's like super confident right now. But from seeing from morning skate today, all the players themselves are pretty relaxed. They're just like, what, we got to do what we got to do, take one game at a time. And they obviously don't want to be in this spot right now, but I think that's also good motivation. You got to play must-win hockey if you're going to win the Stanley Cup anyway. So here's a good time to try that out.
Can you tell me why Matt Murray's not playing?
I'm not. Again, they said he's healthy. I don't know how true that fully is. It's a guy but at the same time, he hasn't played since April 2nd, so that would still be a long time to kind of rush him back in. Yeah.
Well, a lot was made about his acquisition, right? And I think at the time it was 4 times like this, right? Not saying he was going to be injured and then come in, but you wanted his experience in Pittsburgh for this time of the year. It is an interesting group from afar because it always feels like it's one step away from the banana peel, and not necessarily by its own doing, just the way that it's covered. To your point, like everybody was off the bus couple of days ago. Now they're back on the bus. It's got to be mentally draining for that squad.
Yeah, and I have a Blue Jays game to go to on what's supposed to be Game 7. So I'm watching that with some interest there. But it's a city that breathes and dives with Toronto Maple Leafs, and it's everyone wants the best for this team in the city, and you see kind of what's happened or a lack of what's happened in the last 20 years. Basically, since I've followed hockey, they have never been able to make it out of the first or second round. And, there was all that optimism after winning that first round. And it was like, is that enough? Would that be enough to make the fans happy and, look forward to the future? But no, it shouldn't be. You want to keep moving forward. And the Panthers are a team that the Leafs should be able to beat. And, just a ton of mistakes. You could look at the stats and say, know what? Argument to be made that the Leafs were the better team in the first and second game, but they made way too many mistakes, and the Panthers are a team that will make you pay for that. And see what's happened in the series. So defensively has been an issue. Goaltending was not great in the first couple of games, and I think that kind of those concerns weren't there in the last game. So you just got to copy and paste that effort.
In the first 3 games, did Florida throw something at Toronto that they hadn't seen before?
A forecheck? I don't know. It was kind of like just the thing that Florida was just doing really well was just getting in the way and blocking shots and poking pucks away. And the Listerionen's been a good example there. But, for as much has been made about Toronto's core not scoring, Barkov's got 1 goal, Kachuk's got 0. It's like their core's not doing a lot either. So it's not like it's just one side or the other, but it's just Florida is making Toronto pay for their mistakes. And, Toronto, it's weird because you think Tampa Bay, that's a team that should be able to do that well, but it looked like the Leafs just got too comfortable in their own zone against Tampa. And that just won't work against Florida, a team that's been playing must-win hockey for a couple months now.
It's clear to me, and you're closer to it than I am, but I'm watching from all the way back over here. It's clear to me this series now at this juncture is on the back of Bobrovsky. That if he can't afford a stinker here, right?
No, 100%. Again, argument to be made, the Leafs are the better team those first 2 games. And Bobrovsky was the big difference. And goaltending has to be better than the Leafs goaltending tonight. Just simple as that.
Carolina, any thoughts? I mean, they move on. I refer to them as killers off the top. There's 2 series, not that they're indestructible or anything like that, but man, they just like those first 2 series against the Islanders and Jersey. They just look like killers.
Yeah, they were the team that I picked to win the Stanley Cup originally at the start of the year. As a coward, I changed to Boston heading into the playoffs. But with the Hurricanes, it was just I didn't expect them to be this good with all the players they're missing. Like that's a group of guys that you would not expect. No. I think with the Devils, I think that was a wake-up call for them. You look at it, and Carolina look at the way that the Hurricanes got their defense to really be a huge part of their team. You look at on the screen right now, and Burns and Gostisbehere and Martinook and Slifen, like those are great guys who make it so hard to play against. And they were getting scoring depth from everywhere. And I think for me, one of the big questions was whether or not their goaltending could get the job done in a situation like this, because every year it seems like Freddie Anderson's getting hurt. That's just been the story. But as long as he's staying healthy, he's still a pretty good goaltender, and that's kind of what you need to be when you've got the defense you got, which is could shut you down in any way possible and can also score. So with the Hurricanes, they're kind of looking unstoppable right now.
Jerry, and in fairness to Jersey, and I guess I'm trying to still make a point from 3 weeks ago. Those first 2 games against the Rangers in that opening series, I said, well, that's fine. I mean, they're just learning how to lose. That's what a young team does in the playoffs. God bless them. They came back and beat the Rangers, but they're not going anywhere. I mean, this Jersey team is going to be a playoff fixture for the next little while. I believe you're closer again.
Yeah, well, next year, going to get Simon Nemec and Luke Hughes full time, so that alone will make them good for a team that was as strong defensively as it was. So it just, for me, a big part of that is who's going to be that goalie next year. And for even when the Devils were thriving in that start of the year, Vitek Vanacek's advanced analytics were not great, and there were signs that he was maybe not the guy you needed to have as your number 1 in the playoffs. And then you're going with a guy, Nikita Schmid, who, should have been the AHL. So it'll be interesting to see who that number 1 is next year. But, up front, they've got, Jack Hughes that is starting to peak, and that's good to see. And then that defense is just as good as it is. So I think there's a really good future there for the Devils.
Would you go out and get a goalie if you were New Jersey?
See, that's the problem. It's like, the free agent market sucks, and then what do you do for the trade? Like, can you somehow maybe get one of Boston's goalies? Maybe, but it's just,
well, they can't afford to pay both of them at some point.
Yeah, you're gonna run into some issues there. And so it's like, well, and see, Boston could move on from one of those 2 guys, and they got one of the best AHL goalies in Brandon Bussi. So it's like that's a great situation to be in. So I think maybe you look there, but just it's. You don't want to overpay for goalies either. We see kind of how fickle that market is every single year.
Absolutely. Any thoughts on out west before I let you go here? I mean, I know some of these games are ridiculously late where you are, but Dallas is in the lead, and Vegas and Edmonton are right at each other's throats.
Yeah, that both series have been fun. Given how much we've seen of these blowouts in the second round, it's been interesting. The Vegas and Oilers series truly feels like a war, and I think that's kind of been fun. You don't know what you're going to get on a given night. You got guys swinging sticks like it's the '80s, and you're Billy Smith, and seeing what you're doing out there. And then you look at Dallas and Seattle, two teams that play very similar brands of hockey. So I think maybe the second round's getting a bit more heat than it deserves, but I've enjoyed what I've seen.
Heat in terms of just the quality, like
like just like we're seeing a lot of blowouts. It's like I made a joke earlier on Twitter today. It's like, man, I wish the playoffs were like this Czech-Slovakia game we were watching where 5 goals in the first period was just absolutely wild. But it's been pretty solid hockey when you look at it, and the fact that it's every night it seems the momentum changes is a good sign.
I just think we have short-term memory because every year we say the same thing. Oh, yeah. A better series, better first round than we've had, and then the second round is just compared to. But you just beating the crap out of each other for 7 games, and you're thrown right back into it. So it shouldn't come as now. It becomes the war of attrition, right? Like now it becomes who can stay healthiest and who keeps the critical guys in the lineup.
Maybe it's a hot take, but I think the playoffs are way too long. I think it'd be almost more fun to see teams have to be really good in a 5-game series. And then maybe the quality of hockey would kind of pick up near the end, but that's just a hot take.
I don't mind that take. We know why it is what it is. And quite honestly, I'm sure there's some owners that would like to play best of 9s. But we're seeing it here with the Wranglers in the American Hockey League playoffs, right? Like they lost to Coachella Valley last night. They chose to play the first 2 at home and the next 3. And I like that idea of a choice. Like I like that idea of saying to a team, okay, what do you want to do here? Right? Like now, if Calgary's going to win this series against Coachella, they got to win one at home or 3 or 2 on the road. Right? That would be a fascinating experiment in the NHL. Right?
Yeah. It's especially when you look at this Toronto series where they've had so many like 2 to 3 day breaks. It's like, that's ridiculous. We could just continue to speed this thing up. It's like this. Yeah. If this series goes 7 games, that's 3 weeks of hockey. And then we still got to go to the next round.
And then go to the next. Yeah, no, I know. God bless television. I really appreciate this, sir. Just give us a little sense because we are just a little over a month away from the draft. You are, after all, the prospect analyst for DFO. What should we look for daily face-off and your coverage here as we get closer and closer to Nashville?
I'll have a lot more prospect profiles. I'm trying to aim to get as many first round prospect stuff as I can. And, a lot more stuff like deeper things like, re-entry players, guys that could be late round steals, a lot more on the goalies, and going to have a final, I don't know the number yet, but a very long final draft list at some point too.
Wow. So is somebody going to come? You talked about the depth of this draft. Is somebody going to get passed over in this draft, get that free agent invite and maybe make it?
Oh, happens every year.
Doesn't it?
It happens every year. So we'll see.
Yeah. Hey, listen, Stephen, thank you so much for doing this. I appreciate it. Love reading your stuff. Obviously, it's a very exciting time for the Chicago Blackhawks and their fans, but thanks for spending some of it with us today.
Yeah, thanks so much.
Stephen Ellis, he is the associate editor and prospect analyst for Daily Faceoff. Joining us, courtesy of the Ski Cellar Snowboard, skicellarsnowboard.com. 76 years in Calgary, 3 locations: McLeod Trail by Chinook Center, 17th Avenue Southwest, Bull Ridge Road Northwest. By the way, not just skis and snowboards on sale right now. You can get some pretty warm clothing there too. Some clothes in there. Coming up on the program Monday, Flames alumni Stanley Cup champion Colin Patterson, Ryan Pike. Wednesday, you're in for a treat. Oh my gosh. This is kind of like when Muhammad Ali met Elvis. Danny Hostin is going to host, and Peter Maher is going to be one of his guests. I'm looking forward to that. And then I will be back on Friday next week for Craig Button and Eric Tahachuk. We might talk about some baseball. Oodle Noodle Studio, that's where we are. We bring the heat. Try the butter chicken, mac and cheese, Kung Pao noodles, Bangkok Pad Thai Classic, vegetarian and gluten-friendly options. Pickup and delivery, 2 locations, 1244 17th Avenue Southwest, 105 Main Street North in Airdrie. Are you good, or you want me to? It's up to you. I can buy some time. It's up to you.
I'm ready to go whenever you are.
All right. Well, let's go. Are you? Okay.
100%.
Our next guest brought to you by, of course, Ski Cellar Snowboard, skicellarsnowboard.com. This will be much more interesting next Wednesday when he reads it. 76 years in Calgary. That's all you need to know. Danny Austin from Post Media, kind enough to join us. He basically runs this show now. How are you?
I'm good. I want to lead with one question. When you said that me and Peter Maher were Muhammad Ali meeting Elvis, Peter is both, right? Like he is both the Muhammad Ali and the Elvis in that situation.
Oh, no, you're Elvis.
I'm Elvis? Okay,
Elvis,
I'll
like
take it.
Pete's the world champ, right?
Yes,
and
yeah.
bona fide world champ. But dude, I mean, you make the ladies swoon and you know, all those Elvis things. Just don't eat any peanut butter and banana sandwiches. That's all I would ask between now and then.
Don't make me sing on air.
No, we won't make you sing on air. Would you trade me the first pick if you were Chicago if I gave you all 13 of my picks in Arizona, which includes 2 first rounders and a second rounder?
No.
Well, hold on now. Let me just lay this out. You as Chicago already have an extra first rounder, so that would give you 3 first round picks. You have 4 second rounders. That would give you 5 second round picks and I believe 7 third round picks because you would have 23 picks in total.
Mm-hmm. And you wouldn't have Connor Bedard.
You wouldn't have Connor Bedard,
no, that's
but you could have a whole bunch of really good hockey players.
Yes. I mean, I'm honestly a believer that you don't want too many 18-year-olds in your system or 19-year-olds.
You'd have 23 of them.
Yes, I think that's too many to be developing at the same time.
All right.
I'm also just a believer that when it comes to, and this is, to be honest, across sports, if you can get a generational talent, you get the generational talent. And that's, I mean, it's honestly for me, it's like, it's a fun question, but there is nothing that you could, other than Connor McDavid. If you gave me Connor McDavid,
but not Leon Draisaitl. If I offered you Leon Draisaitl, straight up, if I offered you Leon Draisaitl for Connor Bedard, the first overall pick,
are we assuming that the Oilers win the cup this year or not?
I'm just saying right now in this moment, and I think right now in this moment, would you not make the case that Leon Draisaitl is the best player right now? I'm not saying forever or all season or whatever, but I thought a week ago Matthew Tkachuk could have that title. And we all know that Connor McDavid's going to be that at some point, or is that. But right now, is anybody playing better than Draisaitl?
I have absolutely no issue with anyone who would make that argument. I mean, my argument is always going to be McDavid is the one who scares me the most. On any given shift, he's the one who I still feel can change the game faster than anyone, including Draisaitl. But like, look, if you want to tell me Leon Draisaitl is the best player in the world, well,
he looks like a pissed off maniac.
Yeah.
Right?
With his ankle not hurt this year, he's on a different level and was arguably the best player in the playoffs last year.
Right.
I mean, yeah,
but you wouldn't trade him for Connor Bedard?
It's an interesting question. How old is Draisaitl?
26.
26.
Gavin's going to jump here in a second.
You're giving up a bunch of years there. So for me, no, I still want
Okay, I like this one. Thanks, Gav. I like this one. Would you trade Connor Bedard for McKinnon, Makar, and a first rounder?
Yes. Of course I would. Yes.
Okay, he's 27, by the way.
Okay.
So Draisaitl's 27.
So that's the thing. I mean, you're giving up 9
You're giving
years.
up a decade.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So for me, that's where Bedard, and even if Bedard doesn't reach those levels, he's still going to be a perennial all-star year in, year out. He's, if we ever get back to the Olympics, he'll be an Olympian. He's one of those guys. So even if he doesn't hit that McDavid level, you're still getting 10 years of that quality player. So for me, that's no brainer. But yeah, look, if you're giving me Cale Makar, Nathan McKinnon, and first rounder, did he say?
Yeah.
Yeah. Cale Makar is pretty special too.
He's special. But what I was looking at was really all these tanking teams this year that collected all these draft picks, right?
Yeah.
And now you've got, Chicago's got like 13 draft picks already. Or 14 draft picks. And if you were Arizona, would you just ship them all and say, we'll take your number? Well, of course you wouldn't do it because of exactly what you said. You can't have 25 18-year-olds or 19-year-olds in your lineup. And Lord, what if you're good? What if you draft really well and they all pop at the same time? Then what are you going to do?
So they do that. Does that make Austin Matthews their first or second line center in a year or two?
Who? Chicago?
Arizona?
Yeah. Why does everybody keep saying that?
I'm a Leafs fan too, so I don't know why I'm saying
he's not going there till there's a new building, right?
Fair. Yeah.
Like he's not going to play in that.
Yeah.
You were there, right?
No, I've never been there. But
I thought you weren't in the small rink this year?
I've not been to that arena, no.
Okay. Because I don't think it's
Wes was our guy there.
I don't think it's fair to call it a dump. Because it's a really nice 5,000 seat arena, but it's a 5,000 seat arena.
Exactly.
Yeah,
it's not big enough. It's not NHL quality.
We haven't talked. What thoughts on the Flames have been, active?
Have they ever? There's never a dull summer.
No,
in the
it's
city.
just can't help themselves.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's been interesting. I listened to Peter on
Yeah.
here. I obviously read Rick Bell's column. I will say that as someone who was at the arena every day, I just couldn't disagree with that assessment that this is young players being entitled more.
Mhm.
I genuinely, it was a miserable place to go most days. And I ultimately, nothing but respect for what Daryl has accomplished, but I do think we all know that what he was doing wasn't working with this group, and they underperformed. And as someone who didn't grow up in Calgary and who sort of had an outsider's view of the Flames for many, many years before arriving here and sort of engaging with the sports scene, I mean, my impression was always that this was an organization that was content with just making the playoffs and seeing what's happened. So I think it is refreshing when it comes to that particular component, the Sutter component, that no, they didn't achieve what they intended to, and they're making changes. Now I just don't see how it's not Conroy as the new GM.
I don't either. Other than, if you get it in your head that it can't be somebody who was part of the previous administration.
Yeah, but I mean, I don't think that there's arguably the Flames underperformed over the last 5 to 6 years, right? Now there are some other factors, and I think that we know. I mean, if you look in there, each one of them needs to be taken on their own. It's not fair for me to say, but you look at Dougie Hamilton, you look at TJ Brody, Mark Giordano, Matthew Tkachuk, Sam Bennett, who maybe didn't ask for a trade, but is obviously performing better out there. Johnny Gaudreau, all of this. I mean, there's just been this exodus from Calgary over the last 6-7 years. And that for me is the bigger thing that they need to figure out. Is it the arena, or is it what is going on that, and no one wants to talk about it, but
I'll talk about it because I absolutely believe that the biggest issue the next general manager has to clean up is he's got to make it so that players want to play here.
Yeah.
And, I said, I love the internet people because, of course, they remind me of the fact that he was never coming. But what's the legacy of Brad Treliving if Adam Fox is a Flame? I mean, it's a kid they drafted. Nobody else drafted him. The Flames drafted him. He maybe got drafted after. Well, he would have got drafted after, but the Flames went and got him, right? But they couldn't keep him. This was not a destination he wanted to go. Say what you will about Johnny Gaudreau. He left $15 million in a year salary. A year, which would have been $15 million on the table, and Tkachuk wanted to go elsewhere. I think building is part of it. I think, part of it is, the captaincy issue that should have been dealt with. It was ridiculous that it wasn't dealt with. But also, I think there's
by dealt with, we mean Michael Backlund should have been the captain.
Yes. Sorry, we're going to be done a little earlier today because neither one of us are going to argue about that. But I will say, I think you hit the nail on the head. As an outside observer, as somebody who was on the inside, sometimes this organization is too comfortable in the middle and too risk adverse, right? We don't want to alienate anybody. We don't want anybody mad. So you got really kind of tepid, social media. You got pictures of guys coming in, and I like the people that do it. They're just doing what they're told. But, I watched this. You saw the Titans schedule video. That kind of creativity is not this, and I've seen it. They did Fishbird, for Christ's sakes. I've seen them do fun stuff, but they're happy in the middle. They're always happy in the middle. Why didn't they take Joe Ginla? You know what I mean? And that's but, and I'm sure there's a reason and all of that, but sometimes you got to go out on a limb. Sometimes you got to take a risk. Sometimes you got to be, look at the customer's point of view.
And with allowing the caveat that sometimes people misspeak a little bit. I mean, when Treliving stepped down and Maloney and Bean did that press conference, I think that the quote that really got taken and run with was John Bean saying, "I'm not even allowed to say the word rebuild," when he said that. And I think people really, really didn't like.
I got mad at it because I heard it out of Feaster's mouth before. So it wasn't new, and it's ridiculous.
It is a fact in sports. In the NFL, you got to go get your number one quarterback. You got to go get your number one center. You have to, and I'm not saying tank, but you have to put yourself in a position where you're losing and have a high draft pick.
How many times has this club drafted higher than fourth?
Never.
How many times did it draft fourth?
Exactly.
Right? And then our friends to the north drafted first 4 times in 6 years. Right?
And now,
and look where they are.
In right now, in the year of our Lord 2023, how many Oilers fans are remembering how horrible it was there for 6 or 7 years? They've forgotten it.
They threw jerseys on the ice.
And now, but it doesn't matter anymore. And now they're going to.
It doesn't.
They're making all the money back. And they are.
But having said that, Chicago's an interesting story too, because how many fans were pissed off this year because they were tanking after, Kane and Taves, right? Like that part you can't, how many Raptors fans are angry this year?
It's not good for sports, but it's the reality. I mean, look at
absolutely it is.
I mean, look at the NBA right now, and I mean, Philadelphia, they did the process. They tanked for 4 years, and then it didn't fully work out. That's generally the way that you build a contender in professional sports. Is you have to get a top 1, 2, 3 pick for several years in a row, and then develop that core.
But I think players, I don't think there's a problem with the city. I don't think people don't like the city.
No, but the city I've lived here for 13 years.
Yeah.
I've chosen as an adult to make Calgary my home.
Yeah.
So don't take this all right. We're also not a city that is going to be a destination because of the city.
But we have the largest alumni in the entire National Hockey League.
I think when people get here, they love it in general.
Oh, but you're saying picking it on a map going, I've got to go there.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It makes sense. I mean, Matthew Tkachuk, it makes sense that he wanted to be in Florida. Forget all the state taxes and all that. It's beautiful all year.
Was any of that connected to captaincy? And that's a fan theory. That's not I don't think we have a ground in I'm not I just know that people were talking about that last year.
I do think when Daryl said this year, when he was like, you've got to remember that Matthew is American, and for 2 years of COVID, he was really isolated here and couldn't see his family. And that's different from the Canadians.
Absolutely.
I think that made an impact.
Fair. That's fair.
Look, I've said this a million times. We in the media, we knew Matthew Tkachuk was good here in Calgary, including last year. We didn't realize he was this good.
No. This is not this. This Matthew Tkachuk could have beaten the Oilers last year.
100%.
Right? Could have beaten because he got Matthew Kane, Patrick Kane, all the other Kanes. Evander, that's the right Kane. He got inside of his head. He shut him down.
Yeah.
This year, that isn't happening to this guy.
Not at all.
Right? This guy could have led you, right?
And it's fascinating. I don't know what changed, right? I mean, I don't know if it's just another year of development, another year of maturity, of him gaining that confidence, but he is a top 5 NHL forward. And I don't think that we in Calgary realize that that's what
he will. Right now, he will be the best player the Flames ever drafted. Not necessarily the best ever Flame, but he will be the best Flame ever drafted because I think, Nieuwendyk would have something to say about that because there's the Stanley Cups and stuff like that. And Vernon, the same thing. Maybe I'm a little ahead of myself, but has the potential. How about that? Has the potential to be the best Flame ever drafted.
Wonderful player. And as a guy who grew up a Leafs fan, I'm not that emotionally invested in the Leafs anymore. I would like them at one point to win a championship in my lifetime.
They do, sure.
But the emotional ups and downs, I don't suffer through, nor do I really get a ton of joy from. But it's hilarious what he's doing to the Leafs.
Mm-hmm.
It's even as a Leafs fan, I'm like, that's the guy I want on my team.
Yeah.
Right there.
And I look at him and I go, ooh, boy, we could have used him last year. And he was so good last year, right? He's only one of 4 players to have 100-point seasons in back-to-back years on 2 different teams. Do you know who the other local tie is?
No.
Mike Rogers.
Really?
Yep.
Fascinating.
Yeah.
I please don't ask me for any follow-up
trivia.
Information. Yeah.
Nope. That's okay. Mike's coming on the show here in the next little while.
That's awesome.
Yeah. And Cale Makar is really putting a dent in Mike Rogers is the best player ever come out of Calgary argument I have.
Cale Makar is a special player. It was cool last year when he brought the cup down the bow.
Yeah.
I live in Sunnyside, so it was easy for me. I just popped out and seeing how many fans were actually out there for a player with the cup from another.
Yeah.
Market.
No.
It was
that's part of the problem around here too, is that there's too many other teams' jerseys and hats in this town. You need to do something to combat that. I'm in a hockey rink every weekend. And I watch it and I see, a couple Flames hats, but here comes a Vegas hat. Here comes a Seattle hat. And here comes a Crosby hat. And here comes an Oiler hat. And when I go up to watch our kids play up in Edmonton, you don't get that.
Yeah. Now, I will say that, I mean, there was one game last year where I decided that instead of driving to the Saddledome, I wanted to just take the LRT because I think it's important for all of us in media to get out there with the fans a little bit and remind yourself why you're doing it.
A little bit,
and
only a little bit.
You do have to be, I ultimately though, I mean, I got on and it was amazing to experience living in the city for as long as I had there. I think it was game 1 or game 2 against Edmonton. I forgot which one it was, but it was just a sea of 16-year-old kids. It was kids all in Flames jerseys, all hyped. And I was like, oh yeah, that's why we do this. That's why
Yeah.
we do this whole thing, because that
Yeah.
like I'd never felt that local spirit outside of Stampede, which isn't really my thing.
Yeah.
And
Well, that's what a team can do, right?
Mhm.
And I, this whole thing starts with why not Conroy? I think it needs to be Conroy.
Yeah.
I think, why not? I can come up with a reason, but it's not to me, and I've said this all along, it's not whether or not Conroy's right for this job. It's whether or not this, the job is right for him in a sense of what else is he supposed to do?
I'm not a gambling man, but if I was, I would put my money on Conroy with a Ginla in a consulting role for the next year.
Yeah.
He finishes out his work in the Okanagan, and then the Ginla joining as an assistant.
So then
that's what I would.
And
that's not sourced, but that's
the
sense
that's what I would like to see. What about a coach?
I do genuinely believe that they are like, it's going to be the GM's decision.
Oh, no, I do too.
I know everyone,
I do too.
Yeah, everyone is saying Mitch Love, and I do hope that he gets a good solid look. I will say, for those people who think that, Mitch Love is a hard coach. He drives.
Oh, no, he's not no. Yeah.
But look, what he's done with the Wranglers is incredible. Knock on wood, they survived the weekend. But I don't have that strong opinion on a coach. I mean, my thing is, to be honest, like, the coach obviously matters. I'm just as interested in, like, I think you have to have a decision on Lindholm basically by the draft, right?
Okay, so one back on the coach. I nearly drove off the road when one of the more popular podcasts in Canada suggested that Bruce Boudreau would be a candidate.
I've heard it too.
And I like Gabby. Nothing wrong with Gabby. But John Cooper's been the head coach in Tampa Bay for 10 years.
Mm-hmm.
In that time, there will be 6 coaches in Calgary.
Yeah.
For a myriad of reasons. There needs to be some stability. There needs to be the right guy, and the GM picks that. Would you or would you not interview Carla McLeod?
Yeah, absolutely. I would interview absolutely everybody, like absolutely everybody who is qualified. I just don't think that we're anywhere near that process.
No. This is the fantasy part of the show.
There is no part of me that would say no to any candidate. So yes.
I would, but I would. Don't give me Quenneville. Don't give me Bowman. Not interested.
Yeah, I mean, I think when Maloney said, I think we need young with new ideas, he was saying that in relation to the general manager, but I think that's just generally true.
I think again, back to what we're talking about, the organization needs to have that kind of.
Yeah, and young doesn't mean that they have new ideas, right? Like, you can't just say, oh, they're young. And I do think that this team has a history of hiring. I mean, Glenn Gulletson, a lot of people were high on that. That didn't work out. It's not as if there's a straight line here where you hire a young person and they're going to be successful. You got to get it right, and you have to get the summer right. This is as important a summer as the Calgary,
which you've alluded to. Which
yes.
You bring up Eric Lindholm. You bring up Elias Lindholm. Boomer and I, at the beginning of the week, he just kind of brought it up out of the, like, he wouldn't bring any of that 7 back that are due next year, right? The ones we were talking about. He's just blowing them all out. And I said, Lindholm? And he said, absolutely. I would
Lindholm said, we asked him, will you consider re-signing? He said, I have 1 year left. He absolutely refused to even acknowledge that it was a possibility of re-signing. In my opinion, after what happened with Gaudreau and Tkachuk, if Lindholm's gone, you don't have much choice but to trade him.
Oh, no, 100%. And yes.
And you've got to do it by the draft.
Yeah, I agree with that. And you get value for him.
100%.
You'll get value for him. What do you do with Backlund?
I have a conversation with Backlund, and if Backlund is sincere about, I try to sell him on staying. I think it's important that you have this.
I'm impressed. I don't know if you picked up on that, but he's showing up in Flames media. He's in town. Mm-hmm. He's doing community events, looking like a captain would.
Which he should be captain.
I agree.
We are there, but I also think that in general, have a conversation, and if he is sincere about, look, I've put in my time here, I want to go chase a cup, I don't think the organization's close. That's an actual just do the right thing and give a loyal servant, what they want. And I think that would be very hurtful for the organization. I mean, I think that they do continue to insist that they view themselves as contenders, just with a few little tweaks here and there. But again, we can't talk about rebuilding and retooling and not consider, if those guys aren't going to sign, you have to get assets back.
Do you are we talking about the R words or whatever with Coronado, with Pelche, with Dewar, with Wolf. Poirier probably not out of the gate, but seems to be trending that way. Connor Zeri, although I don't think he's had a great playoff, but has now you're talking about 5 or 6 young players. Is it more about infusing them into the lineup and finding space for them? And I haven't given up on Matt Phillips. I still hope they give the kid a one-way, 1-year deal and let him show if he can do it. So now we're talking 6, 7 guys. Can you do it that way?
I mean, the question is whether any of them are first-line guys, right? I mean, at some point you need that first-line scoring.
You don't think Pelche's? You watched him up closer than I did. I watched him through a video screen.
Yeah, I think Pelche is exciting. I think there's a lot to his game.
Yeah.
I don't know that his numbers justify necessarily saying he's going to be a first line guy.
Okay.
Now he was also on a line with Lucic. I don't think that he was on a line that necessarily brought out the best in him offensively.
Sure.
I'm super high on Peltier, but like being super high on a guy does not necessarily mean I think he's going to be top 20 in league scoring.
Right.
At any point. Coronado is a guy who, even in that one game, just the way he puts himself in dangerous positions.
Yeah.
I really think that draft pick is going to be one that we look back.
I do too. I think it's a good pick too.
And that's a guy playing his first NHL game.
Yeah.
The whole thing. I mean, he'll have to do the work on his body, make sure he's there. But I hope that we're seeing Coronado. For
what it's worth, we just had Stephen Ellis on. He was watching the Americans earlier today. Said he was the best player for the Americans.
I believe that
at the World Hockey Championships. For what that's worth,
and that's without professional coaching yet, right?
So really, yeah, no, that's right. Yeah. That's right. That's right.
So I'm really high on Coronado, and for the record, I think Peltier. I mean, if Peltier ends up being another Mangiapane, we're not talking about the sort of the up and down with Mangiapane over the last 2 years.
No, but when he's right, he's a second line player.
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I think you're happy with that, Zeri. I mean, you named the guys, and I mean,
am I missing anybody that's still coming?
I don't know exactly who you named. I would expect Wolf. I mean,
you weren't listening. I just said it right to you.
I was trying to.
No, but I'm thinking like
Wolf
back or any of those things. What's that?
Wolf. They have to figure out a way to be on the NHL.
So Vladar's out. I think so. And I like him. I mean, it's this has been we're talking about trends with Calgary. Awesome backups. Really nice guys. Yeah. Good guys. Like, they're really good guys. But I think you got to keep Markstrom.
Yeah, and I think that you are going to start seeing those guys get integrated into it. You don't have any choice at this point from a salary standpoint.
No.
In a lot of ways. And it didn't work with these veterans this year. They didn't make the playoffs. So I don't know how you make space for all of them, and I don't think it is next year. But yeah, I would want Peltier, Dewar, Coronado for sure. Mm-hmm. Next year, day one, assuming they have good training camps in the lineup, playing every single day.
Would you sign Matty Phillips to a 1-year, one-way deal?
I would, but if I was Matty Phillips, I would go somewhere else.
Even if the new GM, Conroy, even if it's Conroy, who's been with him the whole way and pushed for him, like he was in his corner the whole time. You think the local kid would say no?
Look, if they are promising the opportunity, maybe.
Well, that's what I mean. One way. That's I realistically, I'm not sure I'm offering a one way, but I'm using that one way piece to say, okay, we learned we're putting you there.
If I'm Matthew Phillips, I'm at the point in my career where one way or another I want to play in the NHL, and I probably.
Do you think he's an NHL player?
I'm 60-40. Yes.
Okay.
I will say that I've talked to scouts who have said, "Oh no, it wasn't that crazy what the Flames did this year."
No. There's a hockey case to be made.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That doesn't mean the part of me that is just a human. I mean, the part of me that's a sports reporter doesn't want to go and say yes, get him in, because I'm not sure. I do think that his size could be an issue at the NHL level for sure. But just as a person, I don't know. He's done the work. I want to see him rewarded with an opportunity. And if he fails in that opportunity, then cool. He's an AHL player. Yeah. There's lots of people who have great lives, great careers in the AHL. Sure. It's just what bugs all of us, and it bugs the fans. I think it bugs people in the media, is to see a guy do the work, maximize his skill set, do everything, and it just not be enough just based on size. That doesn't sit well with me.
It doesn't. It doesn't. It doesn't. I think that's about it. I outside of your Lindholm question, I like him. I think you need to keep him. But I'll tell you this: when Boom and I put up the social media, I was the minority. Boom was the majority. The fans have this. At least the majority of the fans seem to have this will to move on from these guys.
And to be clear, if you can keep Lindholm, I'm on your side.
Yeah.
Oh, I think he's one of the best two-way centers in the league.
I agree.
think you absolutely should try to keep him. I just don't think you can.
Yeah.
I think his answers to me, it was like a read between the lines, and it was a pretty clear reading that this guy is not going to.
But didn't you read that once Daryl got let go, all the players rescinded their trades requests? Didn't you read that?
I don't know that I.
Or did you write that? I'm sorry, maybe you wrote that.
We'll see. I mean, and this is why it's such an interesting offseason, and it's bizarre after last year, where I remember sitting with a couple, other media people having beers and being like, well, we survived this one. It doesn't get any crazier.
Yeah.
It doesn't get any weirder than last summer. And now, to be honest, it feels like this one could be just as significant. No, this is probably more significant than last year.
I have a question for you. Just one more on the Flames, and then we will get to the Stampeders. We have not talked about the announcement of a deal in principle for the arena.
Mm-hmm.
I've said today, and I've said on a couple of occasions, I'm a little bit taken aback that there's no champion of this right now. There's nobody from the Flame side out in the community. So, I remember Ken King with Calgary Next did as much radio and as much, got in, took calls, did all of that, really push. It almost seems like they made the announcement and then they kind of walked away from it. And I'm a little bit, I'm trying to figure this out. Wouldn't you, if you just wouldn't you try to sell people on this?
I'd wait until after the election.
Is that what's happening here?
So to be clear, this is so far above my pay grade that
there's no pay grades here. You know that.
I am not speaking for anyone with the Flames. What I'm saying is
no.
From my perspective,
yes.
The second Danielle Smith tied it to the election.
Yes.
You're suddenly sitting there with a relatively, in this city, unpopular
premier.
Yes. You don't want to go out there and start championing this move and saying, hey, vote for the UCP, because that'll get us the arena built when there's a possibility the NDP is going to win, and then you're on their bad side. I think with the Bill Smith stuff, there might have been lessons learned.
Yeah, you're probably right. That's probably a smarter take than mine. Mine is just like, why you got to push now? Because, and I'm critical of a lot of things, and maybe I'm wrong about this, but they had Lanny there. They had Jamie McCown there. They had Kidsinger. Like, that felt like shovels in the ground kind of announcement, not, boy, here's hoping. Kind of announcement. And I'm worried like you are. Like I said, day one of the election, if I'm Rachel Notley, I come out and I go, not only are we doing the arena, we're building a football stadium. Have that, UCP.
Wouldn't that be something? Wouldn't that be something?
Yeah, and it never happened.
I mean, it's like it's one of those weird spots for any of us to be in, because I fully think that there should be public debate and public conversation about the amount of money, where the money is coming from.
Absolutely.
And yet I am also still, and like that's true of every infrastructural project and everything. This is not I also just really want a new arena for this city. And so there's a part of me that I'm probably being irresponsible and not looking at it as close.
But I got to tell you, I like the vision here, of okay, it's going to be this and it's going to do this, and now it's going to connect the bell and the platform and the library, and it's going to this is awesome. Okay, this I can get into. Yeah, the money, okay, sure, but and I say it all the time. Whatever they spent more on. The investment is going to be greater for the underpass at the airport than it will be on this.
Yep.
I've never gone through the underpass. But we need it, so we have to have it.
Exactly.
It's all cool. But you're right. No debate. We're not having that conversation. And I have no love for the premier, but I thought she was being real honest when she said the only block to this is that, you need to vote for us on the 29th.
My jaw dropped. I couldn't believe she said it, but also, like, to be fair, she was being honest.
She was being honest.
Yeah.
Right.
So, and yeah, it's one of those ones where I think that all of us are a little bit like, we want an arena.
Yeah.
And there's a level where it's like, we don't want to wait another 4 or 5 years for another arena. So I'm supportive of there being an arena project. Yep. And on some level, I mean, it's not enough for me to change what I'm voting for. I'll tell you that much.
Yeah.
But see, it's like, it is, because it's politicized, it's instantly just harder to talk about.
Yep.
Because people on one side are going to come in and be mad at it. People on the other side are going to be mad at it for other reasons. And
exactly.
For those of us in sports media, one of the nice things is we don't have to engage in all of that stuff a lot of the time.
No, but I'm worried that, we got all excited, and then, comes whatever the election result is. And if it isn't that result, then does it go away?
I mean, I imagine what happens is there are a couple more months of talks while they sort a couple
Iron
things
it out.
and I like this. This feels like it's pretty close to the line.
Yes, it does. But the last one was done at the line. It was
know.
signed at the line. The line was done.
This one is such a better proposal than the last
It is.
one.
No.
It's better for the city. It
is.
And I don't want to do anyone's job for them, but like the road infrastructure things, stuff like that is actually needed independent of the arena. Like
Absolutely.
So it's like there's a very good argument for it. It's just that I understand people who just say, hey,
yeah,
look down in LA where they just built a multi-billion-dollar football stadium with no public money. You know, I understand people who want to say that. It's just I don't think it's realistic here. So for me, it's a non-starter of an argument.
If this was an NFL facility, absolutely. But it's not.
Yeah,
meanwhile, speaking of facilities, McMahon is humming again. Training camp is underway.
Yep.
Have you released your 50 thoughts yet?
I have not. I will be working on that afterwards.
I was under the impression you were going to have it done so we could talk about it.
I believe, well, but we could talk about it. We can talk about literally anything.
Yes, we can. We've proven that.
Probably help with my 50 thoughts, to be perfectly honest with you. No, my 50 thoughts will be out tomorrow. It's sort of one of my big Stampeders projects of the year. Really actually helps me because it's basically 50 story ideas. But it's, 100 words per thought. It's 5,000 words. Goes up online.
Yeah.
And so my promise to you earlier in the week, I'm like, oh, yeah.
Yeah, no, we'll talk about that on Friday.
Then, things got in the way.
Having said that, there's a lot to talk about with this team this year, isn't there?
It's this year. I find the St. Peter's, and I love it.
Mm-hmm.
So I find them fascinating every year. But there have been a bunch of changes. I went to the fan forum a month ago.
How was that?
Awesome. What they have done at what I guess used to be called the Red and White Club, now Stamps House, is beautiful. I honestly basically the Stampeders at that announced that they will be putting tarps on some of the upper sections.
Yep.
And I had a lot of fans be like, well, you don't do it. They're not doing anything to market the team. They're just reducing capacity. I was like, that's just not true. That what Jay McNeil is doing, and to be honest, I want to get him on one of the times that I'm hosting.
Please, if you don't, I will, because Jay's doing an amazing job.
It's amazing. And that just being in that Stamps House, being in that environment, seeing the players interact, seeing Jay, seeing Dave, seeing John Huffnagel, all of them interact. I was just like, okay, this is the start of something. It felt like something new. It felt like something. It felt like them finally understanding the extra step that they have to go to reach out to fans in today's era, and I was exhilarated by it. So I'm really excited about it, about this season, and I think it's going to look different. But I think that there's an acknowledgement that something new is needed, and let's do it. Now, the other thing is going to be the on-field product, and I know how much it bothers them. Like if we look at Stampeder since John Huffnagel arrived in 2007, 2008.
Yep, 2008. Yeah.
In general, the minimum that you expect from them is the West Final, right?
Yep.
Like that's
absolutely
over 15 years. The fact is they haven't been in a West Final since 2018, and that bugs them. If you know Dave Dickinson, awesome dude, but he is competitive.
Yep, absolutely.
And they have been very, very clear to fans that this is Grey Cup or bust, which I don't think that. I think based on some of what happened with free agency, I don't think people necessarily thought that maybe this was going to be a regression year, and that's simply not true. They are highly motivated to sort of rectify what they view as being, a down couple of years.
So what gets in their way?
I think we need to see Jake Mayer emerge as a genuine top 3 quarterback in the CFL.
Okay.
I think that in year one, when he filled in for Bo, his accuracy was incredible. He was great, but they weren't really getting the wins in those games. But I think we saw Jake and you thought, wow, this guy, this is Bo's successor. And I largely thought he did a good professional job in the back half of last season. He had the best offensive line in the league by a considerable distance, which helped. He had a running game in Kadeem Carey and Dedrick Mills, which was just absolutely lights out their back. But what you need is ultimately this is still a quarterback league.
Yep.
Stamps are going to have the best run game. They're going to have the best pass protection. But you need to see Reggie Begelton, who they really misused last year. You need to see Jake get him involved.
What do you mean misused?
I just don't think they gave him the ball nearly enough.
Okay.
I think Reggie Begelton could very well be the best receiver in the CFL. And last year he was often their third, maybe even fourth option in some games. And that is something that John Huffnagel in his postseason press conference last year said, we got to figure out a way to use Reggie better.
So was that a criticism of the coach, or was that
yeah, I think to a certain extent. Yeah, they also switched quarterbacks midseason.
Yep.
So there were a lot of learning on the go. But for me, honestly, I think that the defense, there's a couple questions I have in the defensive backfield, but every CFL team has questions in the defensive backfield. And I feel like I'm just sort of going topic to topic. But what happened with the defensive backfield last year is one guy after another got hurt. So all these rookies who were on the practice roster got moved into starters roles, and then they got hurt. So they now have a couple guys with 4 or 5 games of experience going into year 2 that they normally wouldn't have. So it actually has potential to be extremely high end, young, athletic, with a little bit of experience, which I'm excited about. The loss of Jameer Thurman at linebacker really not only honestly disappoints me. There's no one I respect more than Jameer Thurman in the CFL. I think he's just a terrific leader, an amazing man, and I loved covering him. But they've got experienced replacements, and Cam Judge has been there for a year. So I think the defense is good. I just need to see Jake Mayer. You need a superstar quarterback in this league.
Yep,
you just do.
Is the defense a defense that's going to swarm and get to quarterbacks, or is it going to be containing? So
last year you had Sean Lemon, who was second in the league in sacks. The criticism of Sean Lemon has always been that his the way that he plays on the run isn't quite as good. I think that's a little bit unfair. I think Sean Lemon has been in the CFL for a long time and is about to get 100 sacks and deserves to be spoken as a superstar. He's gone. They brought in Hauser. I believe that's how I pronounce his name. It's the first time I've had to say it on air. Who is a CFL East Division All-Star. So look, I don't know that much about him, truthfully, other than that he's got a pedigree that speaks for itself. And then he brought in James Vaughters, who, man, James Vaughters in 2018, he was the backup to Cordero Law, but Cordero Law was an all-star, or should have been an all-star.
Yep.
And then Vaughters went and got a couple years in the NFL. We didn't realize how good James Vaughters was. He's back. He could be a top 1 or 2 defensive end in the league. You got Mike Rose in the middle, Derek Wigan in the middle, have been there for a couple of years, are absolute beasts. Yeah, they're gonna get to quarterbacks. They're gonna stop the run. I think they have potential to be the best defensive line in the league.
Anything we need to note in terms of special teams? I know that they've drafted another kicker, did they not? And too early to. I mean,
it's going to be Renee who is kicking field goals. Renee Paradis.
Okay, so that we're not looking at the end of that yet.
I would imagine this is the last year.
Okay.
He is also.
He's a firefighter now.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah.
But he has permission. He just has to show up for practice. You don't kickers don't go to meetings anyway.
No.
So
Yeah. Just go kick the ball.
He has to be there 2 hours a day, and he's the best kicker in CFL history. So if there's anyone I would trust to be professional, it's him. And then in Cody Grace punting the ball, you have this big booted Aussie guy who's been an all-star twice. Who's amazing. So you've got Mark Kellum as special teams coordinator. The thing that's going to be missing is Jalen Philpott, the first-round draft pick, Canadian receiver out of the Calgary Dinos. Had a pretty decent rookie season with a few injuries. He's torn his hamstring. They announced it 2 weeks ago, saying he would miss all of training camp. They didn't have to do that, which suggests to me he's out for a lot longer than training camp. Why do that?
Yeah.
You can just wait till the first day of training camp and then tell us.
Yeah.
You don't need to
get ahead of it.
And he was also returning kickoffs last year, which means Peyton Logan, who was their punt returner for most of last year, will likely be in there, which just adds another element to the run game. I'm so excited to watch these guys run the ball.
Yeah.
It sounds crazy in the CFL.
Oh, it does. Yeah.
Other than Andrew Harris and then John Cornish before him, we never talk about the run game. But the Stamps have potential to absolutely dominate on the ground. In a way that I don't think we've seen in the CFL in 10 years. They have by far the best run game. Huge guys. They work well together. They're good, go one on, one off. It's going to be amazing to watch.
Any rookies that we should be keeping our eyes on?
I haven't dove in enough. I will say that when you look at the receiving group, I mentioned Reggie Bagleton. Malik Henry was the breakout. So I really think what we need to be looking at is sort of that third American receiver. Trey Odoms Dukes is a guy who got a little bit of a look last year. It didn't blow me away, but I know how high his teammates are on him. But you've got sort of Tommy Lee Lewis coming in. I can probably pull it up here. We'll just vamp here for a second.
No problem.
There's a guy named Andrew Parchman out of Florida State, Tyler Roberts out of Coastal Carolina. That's the position that I'm really looking, because the reality is Kamar Jordan, one of my favorite people I've ever covered, had a pretty off year last year, and I think it cost them some games. There were a couple drops, particularly against the Bombers in 2 games that were really, really damaging. And if you can get a productive 3 Americans, that's what you need in this league.
Mhm.
And they didn't have it last year. So that is the spot where I'm looking at. And then you have a big Canadian named Ryson John. He's like 6'7". Really interested to see what he does. He was down in the NFL for a couple of years.
Dave, 2 roles this year.
Mhm.
Is that a big deal? I mean, does that matter anymore? Is it, you know?
I think it's a big deal. I mean, I'm always going to be curious as to how involved John Hufnagel is with everything.
Absolutely.
Anyways,
100%.
right?
Yep.
So I think that he has help in both roles.
Mhm.
And I think that this is a criticism I have of the CFL in general. It tends to the same head coaches get recycled. I think that both Mark Killam and Pat Delmonico are absolutely ready to be head coaches in the CFL, and I'd love to see them get that opportunity. They are they have huge roles within the coaching staff, and I do think that Dave can delegate. How what she's willing to delegate is another question.
Yeah, no.
But there is no coaching staff that has more experience, that is more. They've been together for a long time.
Yeah.
Those 3 guys, they can complete each other's sentences. I really Killam coached last year a game in Ottawa when Dave had COVID. So that's why I'm not worried about it. It doesn't feel like Dave. Like David is absolutely involved in player personnel decisions anyways. So the GM role, he should be able to slot into relatively quickly. You still have Cole Hufnagel. You still have Brendan Maloney. You still have sort of your scouting staff, which is very strong. So I don't know that it should be an issue, but I do expect Killam and Delmonico to be huge parts in sort of some of the higher end decisions.
When Mark gets a head coaching job, I mean, this is going to be a terrific story, isn't it? Because if I remember correctly, he came here from the U of A, did he not?
I believe so. Yeah.
As a strength and conditioning coach.
And then emerged as like the best special teams coach in the league. And has been that way. And is a guy, I mean, I will say that I've got to be careful with how I frame this because it's not hard to figure out who I'm talking about. But I had a player who was playing for another organization who'd been in Calgary and was writing me and literally being like, you have to just tell everybody that Mark Killam, like just say it publicly. Because if they hire the guy who I think they're going to hire, players aren't going to come. And he's like, every player in the league will come play for Mark Killam. He's that loved and that respected.
Right.
And I mean, honestly, like he's been great to me too. So I'm happy to sing his praises.
No, he's a good guy. He's a good representative. That's what I mean. When he finally gets that opportunity, I think this is that great kind of, I don't know if it's an underdog story, but it's a great from the ground up story.
It's a great Canadian football story.
Yeah, that's right.
It's the type of thing that we want to see.
Yeah.
And he's done it the right way, and he's done it with he hasn't made many enemies along the way, as far as I can tell. And as a Calgary success story now,
yeah, for sure he is.
And I look around the league, and I look at Corey Mace now, defensive coordinator in Toronto, came up out of here. I mean, the coaching tree that comes from Hufnagel, and now Dickinson is incredible. But Mark Killam, I just don't know what he has to do to get that opportunity.
Yeah,
he should have gotten it already. I think it shows a lack of creativity and a little bit of safe thinking on behalf of general managers and team presidents around the league that he hasn't gotten that opportunity. But it's time. And that may, to be honest, with Dave taking the GM role, I don't know how long he wants to do both, right? So that could end up being in Calgary, which wouldn't that be something?
Hey, that would be the ultimate story, right? Where he started to where he got to. And then if he has success, I guess that's the ultimate story, right? Some thought on the CFL itself. Some pretty staggering numbers coming out of Edmonton this week about their losses. Hard to think that that's not mimicked or replicated in other markets right now, that or is that a one-off in your eyes?
I think there are losses everywhere. I had someone tweet me about this, and I will say, I mean, I was at the Commonwealth Stadium a number of times last year. It was the worst. There was nowhere. Toronto is not as bad as Edmonton was last year
in terms of
just
crowd.
Yeah. Now, part of that is that Commonwealth is huge.
Yep.
There was some bad weather, there was some bad luck, but I mean, even the Labor Day replay, which should be one of the biggest games of the year. I mean, I don't know. I imagine they said that there was 21,000 or something like that, but like, I was sitting there with other reporters in Edmonton, and we were all saying, "There's no way there's more than 10 or 11 here." So Edmonton, I think that was expected. I think those numbers were really awful. I think that like the on-field product has not been very good. I expect it to be a lot better this year, but they've got some rebuilding to do. And I do like the energy that Victor Cooey brings there. But I don't think that I think that we have had a decline here in Calgary that is very real, and that I think that you and I can feel, right? Like,
Oh,
obviously,
no, absolutely, you can.
yeah. There's less visibility around the city. There were smaller crowds, but it's worth noting that the crowds weren't as bad as they were in Edmonton last year. Now, BC, I imagine, I don't know what, profit, loss, revenue, all of that.
No, but he's throwing money at it to keep it, right?
And they built something like last year. No, Nathan Rourke's a big part of that.
Sure.
They built something. Saskatchewan, look, the numbers wouldn't look very good in Saskatchewan. But last year was a brutal season. It was deeply frustrating. There was a lot of negativity. The second that they start building something positive there,
It'll
be back.
Yeah.
Winnipeg, same thing. I mean, there's no better place in Canada to watch football than Winnipeg. The fans are insane. When the Riders get back, we'll talk about that competition. But I swear, like, that Winnipeg Stadium is, if you haven't been, I mean, it honestly should be bucket list, particularly a big Winnipeg Calgary or a Winnipeg Regina game or a Winnipeg Saskatchewan game. And then out east, look, there's problems out east, and the Red Blacks haven't won a home game in a couple of years. It's still one of the more fun places if you can get in their little end zone bar. It's a great crowd. It's younger than pretty much anywhere else. Hamilton is Hamilton. They generally just draw a pretty decent crowd, and then Toronto and Montreal have had real problems.
Yeah,
and Montreal had real problems last year with the ownership group. We'll see now that my former boss Pierre Carl Pelledo owns the team. I think it being in French Canadian hands with a big businessman who has a large media reach, I think that's really going to make a difference. But
do you buy in terms of that? Do you buy the theory that he's running that organization and going to run it at a top level to attract the National Hockey League to Quebec City? That he wants to prove to Gary Bettman. They've been down that path a couple of times. Now he wants to go run an organization, run it at a high level to prove that they could do it in Quebec City.
I like that idea. If that's what he has to do, then go do it. That's not a knock on the CFL. Cool. I mean,
no, not at all. I just, it's actually kind of it makes sense to me on a level, right?
And at some point, if you are interested in owning a professional sports team in Montreal or in Quebec, just the province in general, I don't think that there is any question that you eventually want within the next 20 years to have an MLB team back in Montreal. So I'm sure he's got that on his mind.
Yep.
You want to be part of that.
There's another piece. Yeah.
You're going to have to show MLB owners professional sports other than the Habs works in Quebec.
Yeah.
So this is another way of doing that. Let's be perfectly honest with you. I mean, is Montreal, I may be wrong here, but I think I read somewhere that it's the biggest North American city without an NBA team. I might be making that up, but NBA is not even out of the possibility for Montreal. So cool. If the Habs or if the Alouettes are the guinea pig a little bit, then all the better.
Well, and that
we need more money.
Yeah, you do. And to me, it's, you mentioned last year what a disaster it was in terms of ownership. I'm thinking they might have got the right guy, in that regard. 100%. For those reasons, right? Yeah. For those reasons.
He's got deep pockets. And no matter what, I mean, people ask me all the time, what's wrong with the CFL? They want me to talk about marketing. They want me to talk about this. They want me to talk. No, there's not enough money. There's literally all those things. It's chicken and egg. I understand that. But what this league needs is money.
I because you brought it up a little while ago and then went through your laundry list of cities, which I loved every second of.
I hope that's okay.
But let's come back to Calgary. No, you get the show next Wednesday. Do whatever the hell you want. I want to come back to Calgary for a second. You're not traveling this year?
No.
Okay.
Post-media travel is not.
Okay.
Nothing.
To me, that just speaks to one of the broader problems. Has any sport been more affected than the CFL, than the deterioration of the traditional medias? By not having supper time news and by not having newspapers and by not, we can talk about the building, and I think the building's crap, and I think that hurts your attendance. But I don't know, Jake. Don't know. I knew that guy. I knew Bo Levi. I knew Henry. Hell, we knew Michael Federick even. But one of the criticisms that I have of the last 10 years or so, was the players weren't available. They weren't out. They just didn't seem. But then the outlets all went away, right? And then it became difficult. And then you're the backbone. We've had this conversation. You were the backbone of this for the last couple of years, and now you're being stifled. I said that, not you, by the way. Yeah.
And I mean, the travel thing is a separate issue there. And I mean, I think, as you know, and I've spoken.
But that doesn't help the coverage, Danny.
No, well, and I mean, the issue is for people who don't understand it. I mean, this is not actually like everything you are saying is right. It's not actually the CFL's fault.
No, not at all. Not at all.
And it's not the Stampeders' fault. But
No.
if I look back to 2016, 2017, 2018, I mean, those were my first 3 years.
Yeah.
You had TSN and a camera there every day. You would have had CTV and Global.
Absolutely.
Dave Rowe would have been there.
Yep.
You know, there would have. I would say that there would be 6 probably media people every day.
Yeah.
At this point, it's me, Mark Steven, and like I don't know if Matt Rose is going to be back this year, but like those were
that was it.
And like
and that's what I'm saying. Like, you know, a decade ago, 15 years ago, when people were still consuming that media, you saw those guys. It's hard for me to name 5 Stampeders right now.
Yeah.
You know, off the top of my head, right? I don't know who Jake Mary is. I don't know who the Nick Lewis of this team is, right? And that's the joy of the CFL. That's the panache of the CFL. It was always, they were available. They were accessible. And this is not a criticism of Jean over there or it's not a criticism of the CFL.
Business, yeah.
We just, it's evaporated on them.
And I mean, to add to that, I will say that the people at Stamps TV, I mean, Spencer, Michaela, and Natasha are honestly doing such an amazing
job.
They are. But you have to actually seek that out, right?
Right.
The advantage to our traditional media is that it was in your face.
That's right.
You would be watching Global at 6 o'clock and you got hit with it.
That's right.
Maybe you're not getting that anymore.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, that's stuff that does need to be rectified, and that's stuff that I've certainly found deeply frustrating.
No, I know you have. I know you have. My solution to everything is F1 Drive to Survive. They need to find their content platform that works for them.
And I mean, I'm like, you know, hoping to do more with you and you know, do more video. And I will be with my friend Darren Bombing in Winnipeg. We were just like, you know what? Let's just do a 5-minute hit on the CFL every morning, record it, toss it on, barely even produce, just a Zoom call. Just have some video out there because
I think that's the future.
Yeah.
I think that's the future.
It'll be on YouTube. We might get 100 views per thing, but at least someone's talking about the CFL because it's not happening on radio.
It's not.
And so, you know, we're going to try to do that a little bit this year. I'm not a 9 a.m. type of guy, so we'll see how it goes. But
I understand.
But yeah, so I don't know the solutions, and it always comes down to this one thing, which like I have a moment every year, and I'd like to say that it's Labor Day, but it's normally earlier than that, where I'll have been doing NHL, and you know, I get back to Stamps, and I feel at home doing Stamps. But then I have a moment where there's a game, and it's normally Winnipeg, and it's Calgary, and it's these 2 teams, and I'll feel like it's underappreciated. And in the middle of the game, the crowd's going nuts. The CFL fans love the CFL so much.
Yep.
And I'll just be like, this is literally the best league in the world. And I honestly believe that.
No, I know.
And I could not do Stamps this year. It's completely an option. I was told, like, if you don't want to do it, do it. And I'm like, no chance I'm not doing it. I needed a break. I needed to get away from it. I was pretty frustrated at the end of last year, but I love covering the Calgary Stampeders. And I love getting there 2 hours early, walking around the tailgate. It's the best tailgate in the country by far. Don't let anyone tell you differently.
I don't.
No,
I don't.
People in other markets got mad at me, and I'm like, well, it's just because you haven't done it. You know, there's Alberta in the summer. It's such a special place, a special time, and I'm really looking forward to it. And for all that's wrong with it, there is a lot that's right with it. And I always try to make that point because I think that people, not you, but I will go on radio occasionally, and they'll just do 10 minutes of bashing the CFL, and I'm like, well, I love the CFL.
Well, but I'm still of that, and we've had this conversation before. Was the tail end of that generation that was so angry at the CFL, but had to defend it because it was ours. Yep. You know, the American, you know, the tail end of the 5 in a row by the Eskimos and the American experiment and the good quarterbacks here in Calgary. But, you know, there was still 2 teams were always life and death, right? 2 teams were always life and death. Mm-hmm. This team was life and death. Like it was life and death. Yep. And damn it. It's the best league in the world. And it was kind of like that. Yep. But it always had good people. It always had good stories. It was uniquely Canadian for a lot of reasons. And that's, you know, again, we can even get into that, like, you know, the ratios and stuff like that. And I'm more worried now than I've ever been. Worried about it more than I've ever been.
Yeah. And I mean, it's always so tough. Like this is true of every sport, but it's like particularly feels true about the CFL. I watched with John Bender.
Yeah.
He did at what do you call it? Trolley 5. 17th. He did a Grey Cup watch party.
Yeah.
There were probably 20 of us there. It was awesome. In the basement, it was fun. What a game that was.
Mm-hmm.
number of friends who I had from Toronto. Again, I'm from downtown Toronto, essentially, like the area just around it. And my friends aren't CFL fans. They always ask me, they want to know, they want it to succeed, but they're not going to spend their money going to see a game. And all of them were writing me after the Grey Cup, being like, I love this Mwamba guy. Like, oh my God, tell us more about this Argos team. What a game. That was unbelievable. And then there's 6 months where nothing happens.
Yep.
And, there's 6 months where the Leafs are in the second round. The Jays are pretty good. The Raptors. And the problem is you need the Southern Ontario market in this country, and they don't have it.
Yeah, no, I came in, it was all, big and sexy when I started to bash Toronto, and we don't, I remember being on 960 my first year going, yeah, get rid of them. We don't need them. It's exactly the opposite of that, because if you don't have them, then Bay Street doesn't see you, then the media doesn't see you, whatever that is now, but the decision makers in this country don't see you.
No, and the money doesn't.
The decision makers on the money, right?
That's the thing. And I think that last year, the best thing that could have happened for the CFL, and to be honest, I've said this to people a million times. Last year, I would have led off the season with like the Bombers have won 2 in a row. Everyone's chasing the Bombers. That would have been my entire CFL marketing campaign. It's just the big bad Bombers. We're all coming for you. Let's go. Chances are, the presidents would have said, oh, you're putting too much focus on one team. We don't want that. It's got to be like, it would have worked. That is what you do. And the fact that the Toronto Argonauts, that team, with the way that game played out, the blocked field goals, everything, that they beat the Bombers is honestly the best thing that could have happened.
Yes.
For the CFL.
Yes.
Now you have a year where the Hamilton Tiger Cats have signed Bo Levi Mitchell. They signed Jameer Thurman. They have loaded up. The Ticats are going to be an absolute just train this year. I think they're going to be amazing. Possibly setting up again. I will argue that Winnipeg has to be considered the favorite for the CFL this year.
Yeah.
Those two teams have met twice in the Grey Cup. What a thing that would be in Hamilton, a third time, this time with Bo. Other possibility is that it's Calgary. Calgary and Hamilton. Or Calgary and Toronto, where your head coach and defensive coordinator and Fuller and Urmlade, all these guys. These stories, you can tell from week one. There's no reason why they can't be trotting out videos highlighting like this is the crash course that all these teams could be on.
We still are anchored to old thinking. Too many old thinkers. You mentioned, we talk about Victor. I like Victor, and he's a dreamer. Did you see the freaking snowboard set up in Commonwealth? I was up there. I saw it. It was awesome.
I was at the announcement for that, weirdly enough, as a favor to a friend.
Really?
Quinn.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
She just called me and was like, hey, she's working with.
Yeah.
And I was like, there's no way. So I've only seen it on YouTube.
No, we were up there and I drove by it and it was lit up at night and dark and it was amazing. And I'm like, this guy gets it. He gets it. The guy out in BC gets it. You were talking about Jay earlier. Like, God bless you, Jay, and I hope you have more success than some of us did. But we need new thinking. We need new blood. We need, it can't always be a callback to the past, right? It can't always be because if you think people are going to put on fur coats and slip a little scotch into their hot, into their, I don't know, a drink, so I don't know, into their coffee, and go sit -40 because that's what they want. That ain't this crowd.
No, Jay gets that though.
Yes, he does.
He is the perfect person for that role. He's deeply connected to the CFL, but also has had a tremendous amount of success in the business world. Understands how to talk to corporate Calgary, right? I mean, you need to bring corporate Calgary back into the fold. There's no one who I'm really excited to see what Jay brings. And part of that is I'm friends with everyone who works for the organization and they're excited.
They're hard not to like though.
Oh yeah.
Right. They're hard not to, except for Ross Folan.
Anyway, say a bad word about
no, I'm just kidding, Ross. I'm just kidding.
But yeah, so I'm like genuinely of the belief that I think that putting the tarps over is perfect. I honestly people.
I would rather look at the tarps than those empty corners,
100%.
and I've been looking at those empty corners for 15 years.
100%.
Give me a reason to take them out. Give me a reason to take. Jason Kelly and that ticketing crew would be happy to go take them out. They'll sell them.
Yeah. Well, they'll be out for Labor Day. They'll be out for the games against the Riders.
Yep.
But this is how I know that it's not hopeless. Is last year, Alex Snell came down, did a great interview with me. I appreciate it. But I think it was week 6, and the Stamps and Bombers were both undefeated. Although, I don't know, it might have been. it might have been game 2 that they played head to head. So the Bombers might have been the Stamps ones, but either way, it looked, and I will maintain that last year there were 3 teams in the West that could have won. The Lions with Nathan Rourke obviously beat the Stamps and beat them badly, but that game also had a couple weird play calls, all that. The Stamps were in the mix but it felt as if it was the Bombers and Stamps finally, the 2 powerhouses of the last 7 or 8 years, finally going to meet in the West Final. Here we go. And attendance had been around 21,000. And I wrote a story, and the attendance for that game was around 26. 5,000 more people showed up for the big game against the big opponent. That shows me that people are still engaged. That shows me that people still care. That people will come out.
That's a great point.
Because if people were checked out and didn't care about the CFL, the opponent wouldn't have mattered. And Winnipeg, it's not like we have a bunch of Manitobans just hanging around Calgary going to every Bombers game the way we do with Riders.
Don't you think it might have been your well-crafted story that might have just inspired people to go?
If I could inspire 5,000 people to go, I need to figure out a way to monetize that.
Any scouting report on the world's fastest cow?
I have not heard how tryouts have gone.
Okay.
I look forward to them announcing the world's fastest cow so I can talk trash about the new cow.
I spent 4.5 years over there trying to get on the field against that cow.
You know that I raced him, right?
Huh?
I raced him.
Yeah. No, I know. And you've been in GQ. I get it.
I have been in GQ.
I know you have been in GQ. Oh, funny how that showed up in another conversation. Oh, Julian's going to be all over you.
No.
I'm
sorry, Julian.
Oh, hey, switch of sports on you. Why? What? I thought we were getting a UFC event here. Or we still are.
About that. I don't know.
Oh, come on.
I know they chose to go to Vancouver.
So we're not getting one in June.
Not as of now.
Okay.
No, they're going.
I had a guest on and everything talking about it. I was so pumped up, and I was excited because, of course, 2012. Now there was one in 2018, but this was supposed to be.
The 2018 one was great.
Yeah, and JD Lewis was on, and he was talking about how great that one.
That was like a truly. I mean, the problem was it only drew around 11,000.
Yes.
And it was a card that, admittedly, it's a card that if you look back on, looks even better. But as someone who was covering the sport at that time,
it was kind of like,
as somebody who was covering the sport, I couldn't believe how good it was.
Right.
It was just like guys who were maybe a fight away from becoming superstars. Stars.
Yeah.
But then you had Jose Aldo. Like it was a good card.
Yeah.
But they'll be back here eventually. I mean, I still think that the UFC, like, they're not in the space anymore where they're just traveling every week to a new city. They do most of their events in Vegas at this point. And then the big ones, they'll travel. But even then, the big ones are not. The big ones aren't going to Columbus, Ohio. The big ones are going to Dallas.
Yeah.
So.
Well, but now they've got WWE, so
I know,
right? It's crazy.
It's fascinating. I'm not a huge I support what you like, but I don't follow wrestling on a day-to-day basis, so I don't know what that deal means.
How dare you, sir?
I know.
What it means is that there's a content deal out there for somebody because you've got bazillion years of WWE content, you got a bazillion years of UFC content. Not to mention the new stuff, but somebody out there is going to get rich on that media deal.
Yeah, and no off season for either, right? So should be. Yeah.
Well, that's just it. And then do you take bits and pieces of them? Do you open up UFC UK and UFC Japan or all those? You know what I mean?
The next big American media rights deal, because NBA is coming up soon. Right?
No, I don't think it's it's being talked about right now. I think NBA is the big one.
Yeah. I
think the NBA one is again, we just saw the Premiership go to Sky TV. We were talking to Adam Seaborn about that on Wednesday. There's still money out there. Surprising to me, there's still money out there, right?
I was reading somewhere that they say that after the next NBA deal, the expectation was that salaries could go up to 75 to 80 million a year for players.
Yes.
Yes. Why, if you're LeBron James, you just kind of hang out for a couple more
years.
I
think that's why he wants Bronny to make it.
Yep.
Right. And no, I think he wants the money not to play with his kid, but you know what I mean? No, I think there's GMs right now in the NBA that are getting ready to pay that and are, kind of making decisions today based on what it's going to be. Yeah. If I pay this guy today, what am I going to have to qualify him in the new leagues and, or what are we going to have left? And it's the one, and again, I'm a homer, but the one I'm fascinated to see is when the Rogers deals ends for the NHL. The gravy train might be over there.
Yeah. I mean, I do not expect that to be a one media group winning the whole thing next time. It has to be split up, right?
There's nothing that I see about Rogers that sends me signals that they want to spend any money on anything. They brought in a hockey show for the playoffs. Like they're importing a hockey show. I see more Jack Edwards and Rick Ball on those stations, right? Like they take, again, if you're a Jays fan, but this year's better. I think there was a few more spring training games, but there was a spring training there a couple years ago. I think they did 1 or 2 games. I don't know, man. And again, you probably heard this in the NFL side of things. The fact that Amazon might get the flex and everything, and there's a lot of people angry about that because they've only been doing it for 1 year and haven't had much success. But there's a lot of thought that Goodell really believes in streaming. Where does Gary Bettman fit on streaming? And now with those RSNs failing in the United States, streaming and I'm not sure about Canada because they're not failing up here yet, but.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's inevitable that that's the way it goes, right? I mean, I think that it's where every other entertainment business has gone. It's where the music industry was to, Spotify and Apple Music.
Yeah, but
the music,
DAZN didn't. DAZN spent a lot of money, hasn't quite gotten over. ESPN Plus spent some money, hasn't quite got over. Right, like
I think ESPN Plus has been a success for Disney. And
I think it has been, but it hasn't become Netflix. It hasn't become, I would say Disney Plus is probably bigger than, and I might be completely wrong on those numbers, but it hasn't impacted the world of, they haven't become that big figure in rights deals, I guess. The NHL's on there, but it's an add-on, right?
For sure. And I think that's going to be ultimately the question, because it'll be the tech streamers that have the money to actually buy. Like it'll be the Amazons. It would be Netflix, but I mean, those are really tech companies that produce content, like is what they are, right?
Might be the Nation Network.
Let's
we might be the carriers in the National Hockey League the next go round.
I mean, you got Peter Marr coming on.
We got Peter Marr. Well, you got Peter Marr coming on, right? You know who else is coming on that show? You
haven't quite decided yet.
Haven't quite decided?
I'm in the process of it.
Okay. And then you got 2 weeks from today you're hosting too.
Yeah. So I think we have 3
I'm
days
getting lazy all of a sudden. I'm just not showing up. I'm just going to have you do the shows.
I appreciate it. It's no, it should be fun. I'm not going to say, I'm always trying to secure one person who will say yes, but then not quite say yes to me. So I'm hoping to get that guy for Wednesday. But we'll see. Otherwise, there's lots going on.
Oh, I know who he is.
Yeah.
Okay. I know who he is. All right. 50 thoughts tomorrow.
Yeah. Okay. So,
and what do you call it?
Danny Austin's 50 things I'm watching this St. Peter season.
Okay.
So a lot of it
I like the old Peter King 10 things I think I know.
Yes.
That one was always, I can relate to that.
If there's one thing I know, I don't want to be drawing any conclusions at this point in the CFL season. So it's better to do like things I'm looking out for as opposed to things that I think.
Okay. So who's outside of Calgary, who's going to be the most improved team this year?
Edmonton.
Really?
Yeah. I suspect Edmonton
could push for a playoff spot.
Yeah, it's tough because I don't think the East is as bad. So I think you're going to have 3 and 3. I don't
Okay.
think we're going to have a crossover because I think Toronto and Hamilton are good. I think Ottawa should be improved. Montreal, I'm not really that concerned about.
Yeah.
So, but I think BC will regress.
Who's their quarterback?
Vernon Adams Jr.
Okay, yeah, that's right.
Who I like as a quarterback, but they also lost Brian Burnham, right?
Yeah,
they made some improvements.
Yeah.
It's not like they're going to be a bad team, but you went from Nathan Rourke.
More importantly, who's playing home opener?
That's a good question. Yeah. So I think you'll see Winnipeg 1, Calgary 2, 3. I'll go Edmonton. I'll go on record.
Yeah.
Yeah. I like Edmonton. I don't bet against Chris Jones in year 2. I just don't do it.
No, I know. I want to. I really want to. I don't like him, but
I also liked what I saw from Cornelius last year. I think Trey Ford should get some reps. I quietly like that Edmonton team a lot.
You do, eh?
Yeah.
Okay.
Not as a Grey Cup winner, but as a
no. But being better,
yeah.
Right? Being better because 18 in a row without a win at home.
Yeah. And that's where I won't worry about Edmonton until if they start winning. If they're like an 11-win team this year and they still aren't trying, that's when I start to worry about that market. But I think we'll see an improvement, and hopefully we see the fans come back.
Yeah. Well, and part of what might go against them is the NHL team might be playing for a while too, right? There could be crossover at the beginning of the season.
Quite a bit of crossover. God, it can't happen.
I keep picking them because I figure if I keep picking them, then they'll fail for sure. Because I'm the world's worst.
They're so good.
Oh, I know.
They're like,
Are they, or can they just score themselves out of trouble? You know what I mean?
Yeah. But
Because I go back to that game against LA, down 3-0 in the first period, and they did nothing, and they came back and won. I said, that's it. They believe.
Yeah.
Right. There's nothing this team can't do. Even when, Vegas punches them right in the nose, and then they come back and punch Vegas in the nose.
I'm going to be very curious if it continues to sort of flip-flop with one team blowing out the other. I think it's sort of fascinating that that's happening.
I think he doesn't get enough credit. Oh, here we go. Here are the scores. Thanks, Gav. Gav's an Oiler fan, so I get lots of Oiler information. Oh, you know that already. I think the one thing that nobody talks about, I think this team made such an incredible move with Ekholm and not chasing Carlson. Right? Because they were in that Carlson for a bit there. Yeah. When you get Friedman and Johnson reporting it, it's happening, right? But Ekholm has been just outstanding for them, and I think Carlson would have been an anchor.
Interesting. Yeah, I mean, I think Ekholm's a terrific hockey player. That team, honestly, I mean, they're pretty well constructed.
Yeah. Don't give them credit. If you give them credit, it goes right to their heads, and then then we have to listen to City of Champions, and then they'll all spend a Sunday out there painting a sign for Nisku, and it'll just go south in a hurry, right? Danny, appreciate this as always. Thank you for stepping in next Wednesday, and we'll get you back on because obviously there's lots to talk about. And please let us know when you're dropping the 6:30 in the morning show.
Appreciate you, man. Thank you so much for having me.
All right. Thanks, brother. Danny Austin, he is the best from Post Media. You can grab his column tomorrow. 50 storylines worth watching this year that he has picked out for the Calgary Stampeders. There's no doubt there will be many, many, many interesting stories to come out of McMahon on the road this year. He's, of course, brought to you by Ski Cellar Snowboard, skicellarsnowboard.com. 76 years in Calgary. 3 locations, McLeod Trail by Chinook Center, 17th Avenue Southwest, just off of 14th Street and Sunridge Road Northwest. Make sure you go in and say hi. Tell them you were listening to Just a Game. Tell them you heard us talking about the Stampeders. And I mean, not going to get you anything, but they like to know that. I think it's important that they know that. Couple things before we go in our final mile. I have to go all the way back to March 26th. March 26th. Our Calgary Superheroes teams played the Flames alumni. And in the second game, we were in a really tough game. Croner was playing lights out in goal, and Lanny McDonald was really owning the middle of the ice. And young Liam picked up the puck and went down the ice and scored an important goal. And when he came to the bench, he said, "Did you see the goal?" And I said, "Yes." And he said, "Will you give me a shout out on your podcast?" And I said, "Of course I would." I have not. It is May 12th. March 26th was a while ago. I just recently saw Liam, and he reminded me that I did not give him a shout out. So I just want to make sure that I live up to my obligations. So Liam, this is your shout out for your big goal against the alumni way back on March 26th. I may not be a bright guy, but I certainly try to live up to all of my obligations. I got this story here this week, and I've been sitting on it. As we all know, the 2024 Calgary Special Olympics games are in Calgary next year. And usually you go out, you get sponsors, and you go out, you get people to, share the cost and things. But this is a real special story. And I apologize to the family because I know right now that I'm going to butcher his name. But we lost a young man, Michael Van Uitenhem, I believe that's the name, Uitenhem. He was a big hockey fan, played hockey all the way up, loved it, coached it, but also wanted to support Special Olympics. His family, his friends, in memory of Michael, have raised $100,000 to support the floor hockey part of the Special Olympics next year, the Special Olympics Winter Games. You're going to hear more about this story. It was passed on to me. It's a great Calgary story. It really hits you deep and it hits you hard. But what a great way to remember this young man. And so they just it's incredible. It's incredible what this family and these friends have done to remember this guy, Michael, and to help out the Special Olympics. I talk about Made in Calgary solutions all the time. This is a Made in Calgary solution. And one last one. Tomorrow, speaking of my friends with the superheroes, we are teaming up. We're going to be live on location from 1 to 4 o'clock at Pet Value in Deer Run. We were there back in March. So the superheroes are going to be there along with Parachutes for Pets. We are we're stuffing a truck, but we're on a mission. We are sending a ton of food up north for those who've been impacted by the fires. When they are evacuated from the homes, they're taking their pets. That means they need pet food and supplies. So we will be at Pet Value at Deer Run from 1 to 4 o'clock tomorrow. The superheroes, myself, Parachutes for Pets. We'd love to see you. You'd love to come by, meet the hockey players, but also help us out as we get some much needed relief supplies that we can send up north to help those who've been impacted by the fires. Thanks to all of our guests this week. It was a fun week. Thanks to Stephen Ellis. Adam Seaborn joined us a couple of days ago. Ryan Pike was on with us. We've just had a boatload of great guests. Danny Austin today. Danny's going to be back hosting the show with Peter Marr on Wednesday. I'm in on Monday with Colin Patterson and Pike. And then next Friday, it's been a long time, but looking forward to having Craig Button and Eric Dahachuk on the same show. Enjoy your weekend. Thanks for listening. If you're downloading this podcast, leave us a rating. It'd be best if you left it like 3 and above, maybe 4. 5 would be great. Tell a friend if you know who likes old people yelling at them. This is the podcast for them. Have a great weekend. Thanks to our outstanding producers, Jack and Gavin, for doing another great job this week. We'll talk to you soon, everybody.
When there's 2 sides to every coin, then there's a conversation you can join. But I'm an old dog and there's new tricks, and some of my opinions you just can't fix. 'Cause I'm an old man yelling at the sky. I'ma shake my fists at the clouds and cry. Get off my lawn, you snowflake, before I have a meltdown, breakdown, shakedown. 'Cause this is my hometown, so back